Please place your hand over your heart and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. City Clerk, would you please do a roll call?
Councilmember Holstage.
Present.
Councilmember Coors. Here. Councilmember Middleton. Present. Mayor Pro Tem Roberts. I'm here. Mayor Moon.
Here.
All present.
Thank you very much. City Manager, do you have any presentations tonight? There are none, Mayor. Okay, thank you. The next item is acceptance of the agenda. The City Council will discuss the order of the agenda, may amend the order, add urgency items, note abstentions or no votes on the consent calendar items, and request consent calendar items be removed from the consent calendar for discussion. The City Council may also remove items from calendar prior to that portion. I'd like to entertain a motion for acceptance of the agenda. Are there any items any council members would like removed? Councilmember Coors?
Can you please remove 1J?
1J, aye. Anyone else? Councilmember Middleton? Any other items from any council members?
I would, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
I was waiting for you.
Thank you. I always pull a few. I'd like to pull item 1I and 1K, please.
Item 1I and item 1KI. Any others? Okay. Do we have a motion to accept the agenda as amended with the following items pulled from the consent calendars? 1H, 1I, 1J, 1K. Motion to approve is made by. Motion is made by Councilmember Coors, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. Motion is on the floor. City Clerk, you have to do a voice vote, I think.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Council.
Yes, and Councilmember Middleton's recusing from item 1I.
1F.
1F, I'm sorry, 1F.
Okay, Councilmember Holstage.
Yes.
Councilmember Coors. Yes. Councilmember Middleton. Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Roberts. Yes. Mayor Moon.
Yes. Council members, please remember, because it's the system we're using now, you push your microphone on button. Your mic buttons aren't working?
Well, I can't make a motion or vote.
Okay. God love technology. Okay, next item is a report of the closed session. City Attorney, please. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I would like to note that in closed session, we had Councilmember Holstage recuse herself on one matter. I would also like to note that we had City Manager David Reddy recuse himself on one matter, specifically the item related to the Lockwood litigation. He resides within 500 feet of the site that is in controversy with that litigation. Councilmember Holstage's recusal was based on a personal income economic interest, and it was regarding one of the items for initiation of litigation. And as a practical matter, there was no reportable action on any item taken, but the council's directed me to make a report as to a couple of matters. First of all, with respect to one of the matters discussed in closed session, it pertains to a list of concerns that we received here at the city in the form of a letter from an organization called VRON, which stands for the Vacation Rental Ordinance Neighborhoods of Palm Springs. It's dated April 18th, 2018. It's signed by Mr. David Feltman and Mr. Bruce Hoban. They are the co-founders. I was a CC recipient of the letter. I presume they're here to speak about the letter tonight, but I do want to make a report out of closed session that the letter raises some very legitimate concerns about Measure C, the matter that is going to be on the ballot at the time of the election on June the 5th. From the city attorney's vantage point, and I am now sharing this with the community based on the direction I received, this particular initiative, based not only on the concerns expressed in the letter, but on things that I myself have said here in this chamber, will create something of a gargantuan mess in our community. There are some legal issues in the drafting of this matter, and I'm not going to advocate on behalf of VRON or their concerns. I'm certainly not going to engage in advocacy by the city. I'm simply advising you that as a legal matter, there are some internally contradictory things in this initiative as it's been drafted. As your lawyer, I've addressed one in particular prior to today's meeting, specifically regarding home shares. I would certainly join in the analysis that has been offered by VRON with respect to the definition of vacation rentals, also with respect to the definition of clusters, as it plays out in the city's enforcement of the vacation rental ordinance. As the council knows, this initiative would modify that ordinance if it is approved by a majority of the voters. And it creates such a mess that if it actually passes, it's going to prompt the city, in all likelihood, to seek declaratory relief from a court to get some guidance from a judicial officer as to how our new vacation rental ordinance created through this initiative should in fact be enforced, whether a particular path is appropriate or not. Because on the one hand, vacation rentals don't include anything but multifamily. And on the other hand, vacation rentals that are single-family residences can be operating for 24 months. So it creates a certain enforcement challenge for the city. I could elaborate, but I think you've heard enough from me on that issue. In terms of the second report I'd like to make out of closed session, one of the items that we discussed relates to the tamarisk trees that are in the Lawrence Crossley neighborhood. And I want to make a report for those interested in how this has evolved, that April 30th, 2018 will in fact be the deadline for action by the property owners that are impacted by these tamarisk trees. The city, as you know, Mr. Mayor, a subcommittee formed by you and Mayor Pro Tem Roberts, you've taken aggressive action on this, and the city has offered to, at its own expense, remove these tamarisk trees. And it's tried very hard to work with members of the community that reside in the community in that location. It's been wildly successful. We had, of all the property owners, only 4 haven't responded so far. And what waivers we have, we will proceed, in fact, as we've promised, to remove the tamarisk trees, again, at the city's expense. But I want to be clear that with respect to the property owners who haven't responded, that April 30th is a hard deadline. If we haven't heard from them by that point, that's it. The city's going to, at that point in time, try to arrange the very first date possible for its contractor to go out to the site and remove the tamarisk trees. And if we don't have signed documents that we've prepared, again, at the city's expense and with city resources, at that point in time, we're not going to remove the tamarisk trees from the individual property owner's property or adjacent to their property if we don't have the documents from them. If we haven't already reached people in the language that they're most comfortable speaking, we're going to be sending out the same documents that we've prepared in the Spanish language in an effort to ensure that no property owner is left behind and misses the opportunity to have the city provide this service. That concludes my report out of closed session, although I'm going to ask for latitude regarding 2 agenda items for the convenience of the community. I want to say that item 2D, we're going to be opening that public hearing, if you will accept my recommendation, Mr. Mayor, and we're going to be not proceeding to take any testimony regarding item 2D, but we will be continuing that public hearing to a date certain. The date certain would be May the, if I'm not mistaken, 2nd, yes, May the 2nd, when we would resume the public hearing on the fees. The other item that I want to give notice regarding, that's on our agenda so I don't have to interrupt things later, is regarding item 2C. Mr. Mario Berardi is, if I'm not mistaken, one of the principals for the applicant in that matter, and he also happens to be the significant other of none other but our clerk this evening, Ms. Cindy Berardi. And so even though she has absolutely no conflict of interest under the law because she's not participating in making any government decision, we're going to recuse her from participation in that matter. I'll get to play city clerk for a few minutes, if you can bear that. And that's it.
Are you actually qualified to be city clerk?
I'm not a city clerk, but I get to play one on TV. I don't know.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I can turn you off. Okay, anything else? Okay, next item is public testimony for non-public hearing agenda items only. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the City Council only on agenda items. 2 minutes will be assigned to each speaker. Testimony for public hearings will only be taken at the time of the hearing, and general public comments on non-agenda items will be taken later in the meeting. So I'm looking for speakers. City Clerk, do we have anyone who's requested to speak?
Yes, I just received one from Bruce Hoban, item 4A.
Okay, our only speaker we have is Bruce Tobin. Mr. Tobin, you're up. And if anyone else wishes to speak this evening, please put a card into the City Clerk at this time. Otherwise, we'll be closing public comments after Mr. Tobin.
Today, we submitted to you a letter outlining, which I'm not going to repeat again. Thank you, Mr. City Attorney, for reviewing it and expressing your opinions on that. I know that was shared in closed session earlier today. Okay. I'd also like to thank you for the update to the economic report later in tonight's agenda. I would, however, continue to ask that we look at updating the economic tourism report itself now that we have adjusted the basis under which the TOT changes the moving parts of the entire economic tourism report. I would also love to recommend long-term that we look at producing a report like this for our city, including the hotels, including the small hotels. CVCB does this report every year, but they do it only across the 9 cities. I would love to see this report being done so that we could all understand on an ongoing basis, you know, what moving parts generate the tourism economy of this city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tobin. City Clerk, do we have anyone else who wishes to speak?
None, Mayor.
Seeing none, gone. We'll close the first non-public hearing agenda items. Next item, City Council Subcommittee and City Manager's comments and reports. Dr. Reddy, you have any reports? Council members? Councilmember Coors?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple things. So on Monday, the City Council Subcommittee of Councilmember Holstege and myself on business retention and economic development, in partnership with our Tourism Bureau and the convention and the Chamber of Commerce, held a business town hall, which was really well attended. We very much appreciated the large turnout and really great input from our business community. Really want to just thank staff for their work on pulling together slides that really helped our presentations, and Nona Watson, the CEO of the Chamber, and Jamie Canfield, who runs the Convention Center, who all presented. I just want to briefly sort of share some of what happened for the rest of council and for the community. Mr. Canfield shared information on how the city works with our tourism community to promote tourism, which helps so many of our businesses and brings in money to so many of our businesses. Nona Watson from the Chamber talked about how the Chamber supports local business. They now have over 1,000 members, which is a really strong chamber for our city, and shared about their new co-working space, which is getting really great reviews. If you haven't seen it, you should go visit it. Councilmember Holstege talked about the impacts of homelessness on businesses, but also what the city's doing, and I think she'll be sharing some new information in her subcommittee report from our homeless subcommittee. Chief Reyes was there and shared what the police is doing, and among the good news was 31% reduction year over year in business-related burglaries. So great work by our police department, as well as some new downtown efforts the police department's doing. And I shared some of the economic incentives that our subcommittee is looking at, including addressing food deserts, places that don't have fresh food in the city, looking at the hotel incentive program for renovations that might apply to smaller hotels that couldn't take advantage of the last program, and other initiatives. We got great feedback from the community. Some of the things that came up just a couple times, and I think the clerk pulled together a really terrific summary, which I think we can post on the website, and our economic development director was there and helped pull the information together. But really, we heard that from a number of businesses want some more help or someone assigned who's focused on helping small businesses in the city. There was concern that while everyone loves new national chains, that small businesses need to be able to compete, and they wanted more help from the city on that. A number of small hotels came to talk about construction noise starting at 7 a.m., including on Saturdays, and jackhammering and how that impacts their guests, and wanted us to look at that issue as well as giving them at least schedules and notice, but more quiet time in season and on weekends. And I don't want to read the whole list, but we will make it available, and the subcommittee is actually now going to start a monthly standing committee. We're going to get a regular monthly set time that the community is invited to, where we will start addressing the issues that were raised. So overall, I thought it was very encouraging. The community choice energy program that Palm Springs is doing with CVAG, along with Cathedral City and Palm Desert, will be launched in August. We had our board meeting on Monday, and there will be two programs that will be available. There's a default program, so everyone will immediately go into a default program unless they choose not to. And it's going to be called Desert Saver, and it will include 35% of your energy will come from renewable sources, and 50% will be carbon-free. That's much greener than Edison or that the state requires, and will save all customers, businesses, and residents 3% of what they're paying Edison. More exciting is we're going to have a 100% carbon-free option for the exact same price that Edison charges right now. So people who want to be 100% carbon-free can do so without paying a penny more for their electricity than they do now, which is something I know our Sustainability Commission, our city has been very committed to. So that's going to start coming forward. At the Hospitality Association board meeting, members of the Sustainability Commission attended to start a discussion that I think several other council members have raised, I think Councilmember Holstage and the Mayor Pro Tem Roberts, about styrofoam containers and how we can best get rid of those and plastic straws. And I really appreciate them coming to the restaurants and the hotels to be part of the process, to figure out how we can all work together to get this done. And I really, Aftab Dada here, the head of the Hospitality Association, everyone was very receptive to working together and shared, concerns they have, but really appreciate that effort that people are putting together. One issue that came up, and for the city manager and maybe Marcus, was a restaurant who expressed concern that their landlord would not let them have recycling bins on the premises. And so can we find out, I'm going to be meeting on a retreat with Sustainability Commission on Monday, if there's anything in our ordinance or at the state level that could help in this situation, because obviously we want businesses who want to recycle, and restaurants, they talked about all the bottles of wine and all the recycling that gets thrown into the trash, into a landfill. Yeah, the bins are free. The businesses want it. It's the landlord who won't let them do it. So if you can look into that and maybe we can talk on that, that would be very helpful. I want to talk a little bit about our sign ordinance. It came up both at the meeting, but also in reality. As our new sign ordinance went into effect, like many things, it didn't work perfectly for everyone. So David and Marcus and I went out with a tape measure to figure out sandwich boards and locations for businesses that said they were having problems meeting our requirements. And the requirement was to be, which other cities do, as close to your building as possible to keep a clear path on the sidewalk and make sure we're complying with the Americans with Disability Act. There were a number of businesses who actually, by keeping them right next to the business, were impeding sidewalk traffic, and it made more sense for those businesses to be closer to the curb while still meeting the ADA requirements. So what I'd like to recommend, and I know we have other modifications to the sign ordinance from the Planning Commission, at the next meeting is to bring back some kind of waiver provision or a way for people to get a permit that, as long as they're complying with the ADA and our 6-foot clearance and not on the main sidewalk, 3 feet from the curb so someone with a wheelchair can get out, and this will work for a lot of businesses in those areas, that they can get a permit to put a sign in a specific location. So it's not going to move around. We need a very specific location. So that's sort of the recommendation that I'm making along with the city manager and the assistant city manager, and happy to work with you, Flynn, on that. But also, one of the things we heard in our walk and at this meeting was a lot of businesses asked for a little more flexibility on the design of the signs, the one black frame with or without wheels. We also got some requests, businesses who are on corners, whether they could have one sign on each street that they front, and if there are 2 or 3 addresses for one large business, how many signs they get. So just as discussion items, when we bring this back, if we can include those so we can get council direction, since we've never discussed those issues, that would be very helpful. What else do I have? I do want to ask, and I know at the meeting, both our economic development director and city manager spoke to some of the businesses impacted by the fire on Arenas that was on March 7th. But several of the businesses are still closed, and in some of them, when I went to visit, the mold is getting worse, the conditions are worsening, and other merchants are being impacted. And I know our building department has been out there. I know our fire department did the report for insurance. But if there's a way to work with the businesses and the landlord to see what we can do to help speed up the process of getting them reopened, I know our vacant building ordinance is going into effect, but it would be really nice not to have to go that route, and see if we can get everyone to move. Whatever we can do to help move the process forward would be greatly appreciated, because it is a big tourist part of our city, and other businesses are starting to see their businesses impact. And we don't want a worsening health environment there. So I know they've probably reached out to you directly, but would greatly appreciate that. Only other 2 things are on April 24th, next Tuesday at 6 p.m., there will be the Budget Town Hall, which Councilmember Middleton and I will be at. And on May 1st at 5:30 at the Convention Center will be part 2 of the Community Town Hall, where we'll have our senior staff, people can ask questions, very informal with Mayor Pro Tem Roberts and I. The last one, I think, was highly successful. People asked for us to continue it because after 3 hours, we still had a lot of people wanting to speak. So that'll be on May 1st. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. That was my longest one.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to thank Councilman Kors for your work on the sandwich boards. Flexibility was required in that, and those sandwich boards are becoming so important for businesses. So thank you for doing the work on that. And of course, I understand Dr. Reddy went with you that day and got some exercise as well. And Mr. Fuller as well. Okay, I'm impressed, guys. Thank you. Just 2 quick things to report out. The vacation rental ad hoc group met, and we worked with city staff, and we've been putting together an informational card to send out to the community, a neutral informational card that just gives facts about what Measure C will mean. And we're hoping to get that out to the public as soon as possible, along with other ways of just getting straight, clean information from the city on the potential impacts of C, good and bad. The Downtown Development Subcommittee met. Downtown Development obviously refers really to the Rowan Hotel development, the Grit development, and we talked about the ongoing continued improvements going on in the public areas and new landscaping and new benches. And I'm sure most people have seen the gorgeous new sculpture that's there. It's turning into an Instagram explosion, which is great for the city and builds our brand. We also talked about the parking. The public parking is all open now. And not all the elevators are operational, only because they're just finishing up work on the elevator towers. So in some cases, the stairs aren't finished. In some cases, the elevators. But the parking is there, and it's usable, and there are easy ways of getting up from the parking level up to the street level. So use the new 1,200 parking spaces that are below that. Also, we're going to be doing better signage down there. We had some concerns that the directional signage, wayfinding in the garages wasn't that good. It wasn't specific enough to help people get to the elevators and stairs. So that's going to be getting a lot better. And Tesla, the car maker, came to us and they have made a request to reserve a number of spaces. And these will be these spaces will be only, within their request, these spaces will only be used by Tesla in order that you can charge Tesla automobiles. The subcommittee is struggling with this and still negotiating with them because we'd like to see charging stations that serve all electric cars. And so in as much as we're pleased and are working with Tesla, we're still in negotiations on what that will be and how that will work and how many spaces they get and so forth. That's all I have.
Councilmember Holstage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could make a request, because that's exciting and it's so great that a company like Tesla, which is really creating the gas stations of the future and the infrastructure system and transportation system of the future, wants to be in Palm Springs. I think that's so exciting. And so I hear that the subcommittee is doing that important work, and I'm happy that you're negotiating it. I would like to see a decision like that before it's final, if we're going to deny it or change substantially the number of spots that would be available that Tesla is offering for free to our city, that it would come to City Council that would make that policy decision.
We would only come and make recommendations. We wouldn't make any final decisions on that, so you can count on that.
Thank you. And I think as we get more and more into subcommittee work, we still want to be careful about what comes to this body so that we can make all the final policy decisions together. Thank you for your work on that. How exciting. I only get to be on the Downtown Park Project subcommittee, so I'm a little jealous. I have a few updates about our work. So Councilmember Coors already reported on our business forum, which was well attended. One thing I wanted to add is that the Chamber of Commerce put out a survey to local businesses, and it's still on their website, pschamber.org, I believe. And so we're requesting that local businesses or people who work in them fill out that survey. It's open-ended, so you can tell us, the Subcommittee on Economic Development, what you need from us to support local businesses. And we really are considering economic development incentives, and we want public feedback so that we can best support our economic drivers here. So please take that survey or email one of us directly and tell us your feedback, and we will consider it. I'm reporting on our homelessness task force for the city, as well as I sit on the CVAG's homelessness task force, which I spent a few hours at this morning. For our city, we're continuing to work on the fire station that we rented and leased from the county, and we're working on getting respite care in there. So we are working on making that a reality. I went and toured it last Friday, and so that's really moving forward. We also sent out RFQ for a wraparound services that we received a matching grant from the Desert Healthcare District for. So we're working on those two items on our Palm Springs City Homelessness Task Force, as well as we had our last subcommittee meeting, and we talked about working on a core court program in the city of Palm Springs, so people who are homeless and have warrants can clear them in the city of Palm Springs, since we know one of the barriers is that people who have warrants or court appearances can't go to Indio, and so this would allow people to do that here. And so Councilmember Coors and I in the subcommittee are working on moving that forward. For CVAG, they reported the results of the point-in-time count, and I think the city of Palm Springs had the most amount of volunteers that went out and counted, and that was really important for us so that we would have accurate numbers. And though we had double the volunteers that went out, I think last year we had about 25, and this year we had 55 volunteers from our community who went out in the wee early morning to help count people who are out living on the streets. We thought that our numbers of people who are homeless, you have double the number of people counting, you think that we would have double or a substantially significant rise in the amount of people who are homeless in Palm Springs, but in fact, our numbers went down about 9%. And so that's really exciting for our city because we can see the data and the number decreasing, and that all the actions that our city is taking to alleviate homelessness in Palm Springs, to reduce the number of people who are living on the streets, that is all working. So it's about 9%. Other cities had an increase. I can read really quickly some of the general numbers for the county, but overall, in the CVAG cities, homelessness increased, chronic homelessness increased about 10%. Drug use that was reported increased, alcohol use increased, mental health conditions decreased that were reported. So we see domestic violence that was reported decrease. So we are seeing a lot of the numbers decrease, and a lot of the work that we're doing is actually working. So that's great. It's good to see the numbers there.
Christy, but when you gave those numbers about these increases, that's having Palm Springs as the exception, that we're actually down 9% in those areas?
Right, so that's overall, but we, on the numbers of people who were counted, so that doesn't represent every single person who's homeless in Palm Springs, but our numbers decreased by about 9%.
With double the number of people counting.
Correct.
So this is probably more accurate even than last year.
Correct. Some of the numbers went up. Cathedral City went up about 5%. Desert Hot Springs went up about actually 30%. Palm Desert went up 50%. So a lot of those are, who's going out and counting and how accurate the numbers are. And so CVAG is working on that. But yeah, that's correct, that we've decreased.
Awesome.
Whereas it's increased in a lot of other places. So it's really great.
So could that be because of the work of our great subcommittee on that?
I think it is, definitely. And it's so great for me to go to CVAG from the city of Palm Springs because we are such a leader on this area. And I can say, these are the programs we're implementing, and a lot of cities are listening and taking heed and want to follow our example. So our work is a shining light for the valley, which is great. One other thing that I wanted to bring up is Councilmember Middleton and I went to Find Food Bank, and we did a tour about their facility there, and we talked about the numbers of people that they're serving throughout the valley as well as in Palm Springs, and they talked a lot about serving people who are the working poor, people who are working in the service industry or elsewhere and not making enough money to get through the summer and have enough food, and the food insecurity. So one idea that came out of that meeting was to talk to our hospitality groups and our tourism groups and have them maybe present or connect in a way that they could come together about the effects of food insecurity on our valley and our different industries and our workers, because they're in Indio, though they work with a lot of service providers here, but it would really be good to have Find Food Bank have more of a presence in Palm Springs. So since it's my only opportunity to talk to the full council about that, I thought that might be something you'd be interested in thinking about. I have just one other request for upcoming agenda items. We were contacted by Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia's office about a bill that they're bringing forward. It's AB 1885, and they've requested a letter of support from the city of Palm Springs. It's for their California Resident Worker Program and Economic Stabilization Act, and the purpose is to protect industries like agriculture and the service industry so that workers can still continue to fill those positions. And so we can't discuss it now, but if we could put it on the agenda, and I'll provide staff all the information I have about it, as well as a sample letter. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Middleton? Oh, that's it. They were looking at me like you were... Okay. Just a couple things. Dr. Reddy, this might be a question for Marcus. The Tova Hotel, which I've asked about before, which is down near Rick's, the beginning of this opening, at the entrance of the city, it's been sitting there looking a real blight right at the entrance of the city for a year, and it's down to the studs, and what really makes it bad too is the fence is just laying on the ground, the canvas strewn around, it just really looks terrible. I understand they're having some financing difficulties. Do we have a status on that hotel?
Yeah, yes, Mayor, we do. So we've met a few times with the owner, who has advised us that he's ready, willing, and able to start completing the demolition, which was basically almost finished, and getting his building permit to start construction of the hotel, and anticipated doing that next month. So we'll follow up with the owner and get him to repair the perimeter fence. He does have security patrols there because he has other issues he's trying to address. So he's been vigilant in monitoring his property during this period of time that he hasn't been working.
Something I get a lot of complaints about from people are some of the construction projects, which then they have the fences that get knocked down, they look ragged, the canvas tears. I mean, if we look at the Dream Hotel, they're an example of what can be done. I mean, their fence is in good shape. It's printed. It tells what's going on. So we really need to, when we do these projects, we need to have some stricter requirements on this. Even the downtown, the Westman project, the GRIT project, there was times when that got looking really raggedy with the fences. Is there something we can do to enforce taking care of those fences?
Yes. So we will address that with the owner.
Okay, thank you. Another question. I went to a Desert Highlands meeting this past week. Dr. Reddy, I haven't mentioned this to you. One thing they brought up to me was they have, and they're correct, they have the only park in Palm Springs that has no restroom facilities. And since I am the restroom subcommittee for the city council, I wanted to bring that to you. Yeah, I get all the plum jobs. Could we, Dr. Reddy, could you bring that to the Measure J Commission or the Parks and Recs or whoever, and point out the fact that perhaps we could look at that and put it on the unending list of things we need to look at? Every time they have an event, they have to pay. They have to use their own money to bring in porta potties, and they have a lot of events there, and they have the only park with no restrooms. Another thing on my restroom subcommittee work, the restrooms at the downtown, are we made any progress on getting those open? And also, I had the question 2 weeks ago about security cameras, where the developer said that security cameras created a liability for insurance. So I just wanted to know what the status was on those items.
Marcus can fill you in on what we believe the date's going to be for the opening. With regard to the cameras, we're still working through that. We intend to have cameras in certain areas. Those final details have not been finalized yet.
But I understand they're just waiting for us to sign off on those restrooms because they're ready to open. Okay.
Yeah, we're working through that, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Marcus?
Okay. Also, there's something else I asked about the last time. I did go to the HSPB meeting, and because I wanted to see what was happening on the, I have to ask about this in public, because I can't ask, outside of here. They did have the colors at the HSPB meeting but then they said those were not the final colors, and so they had to continue it for another month because they have to bring the final colors. It seemed to be some confusion on what are the final colors.
Well, apparently they're still working with Dunn Edwards on the final colors. They have somebody that's doing more research, but I understand there are other questions that they have about the center as well, and other requirements that they want to make. So we are kind of pushed back a little bit on that time-wise. HSB required more information, so we're, I guess, ModCom is putting that information together.
Correct.
They wanted to meet with me on it, but it's mostly HSPB is asking for more information and potentially more work to be done on the site as well.
Okay. Because I think everybody's anxious to see some paint slapped on that pig.
No one's more anxious than we are, right, Mr.
Okay.
Fenn?
Another question, David, I asked about this at our last meeting. The requirement forecast report, the one that lists the capital work that needs to be done, I've been trying to go through there and study this thing, and it's really hard to do it without the data on, of the $269 million, $98 million is the airport, which is something that's really covered by a lot of federal funds, but that leaves about 170 million that is on the general fund. Would it be possible to put this book together for the council and for Measure J that would parse out what's actually needed from the general fund over this period of this report for capital?
Yeah, Mayor, actually, at our next meeting is our joint meeting with the Measure J Commission to talk about capital projects. And so we're also going to be talking about all city capital projects at that time, and we will have that put together an executive summary for you.
Because it's a great report, but it's 200 pages and it's all integrated with the airport and the others, so that would make it much easier to read if it was parsed out. Okay, that's all I had. Mayor Pro Tem?
On a subject that you brought up earlier on development, I got a letter that concerned me a little bit about the Cameron project, and I know that we had talked about that last time we were here, and sending the developer to work directly with the neighborhood as they clean up and mothball that parcel. And I don't know if this was rumor or if there was some confusion, but this person who had been in contact with the HOA for the neighborhood was concerned that the developer wasn't planning to do that, or the developer was planning to go and, what should I say, maybe talk to them rather than listen to them. And I just want to ensure that when that is set up, that the neighborhood has a full opportunity to express themselves, and that the developer, once again, who's actually been great with that neighborhood, work with them with respect to what the final result is. Nodding heads. Okay, thank you.
That meeting is going to be this Saturday at 3 p.m. at First Presbyterian Church at the corner of South Camino Real and South Riverside Drive. I will be there, and I encourage anyone else who's interested in attending the meeting as well.
Well done.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next item, is that all the comments? Okay, next item is consent calendar. I will entertain a motion to accept the consent calendar without items 1H, 1I, 1J, and 1K, and Councilmember Middleton is recused from item 1F. Motion is on the floor. Motion to approve made by Mayor Pro Tem Roberts, seconded by Councilmember Holstage.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. First pulled item is item 1H, acceptance of the Traffic Management Center and Citywide Traffic Signal Interconnection Synchronization Project, and approval of amendment number 4 in the amount of $6,428.15 to professional services agreement with Michael Baker International for equipment purchase for repairs of damaged signal equipment due to a vehicular accident related to the project. 1H is Councilmember Middleton.
My questions are pretty straightforward and simple, and I see Tom Garcia already there, and anxious to answer them. But it appears we've got a couple of gaps in the synchronization, one at the south end of Sunrise and one at the far eastern end of Ramon, but I suspect there's a better explanation than what it shows on the map. So.
Is it on? I've got my button on. It's not red. I've got to push. Oh. That's ADA. Sorry. Okay.
Okay.
Operator error here. Sorry.
Where we didn't, where synchronization doesn't work well in the corridors is at the end or the beginning, or there's a long space between the synchronized signals. That way the platoons are broken up. So in locations where we don't show the signals being synchronized, it's likely at the end of the corridor where traffic is just coming into our synchronized corridor. With the new CVAG project, for the regional synchronization, those endpoints will be extended and addressed, and then the entire corridor will be synchronized.
That makes sense to me on Ramon, but it still doesn't seem to explain the gap at the south end of Sunrise between approximately Mesquite and East Palm Canyon. And I'm looking at page 5 in the staff report.
I'm not certain of the additional signals that would be available for synchronization in that corridor.
As it stands right now, we're running from, and this print is pretty small and vague, but it appears from about Sunrise at the north end at Aleja, Vistachino, and at the south end, it stops at approximately Mesquite or Sunny Dunes. And again, the printing on this is really faint.
At Ramon or Sunny Dunes?
Yeah. Sunrise
Past
Way
Ramon,
at
okay.
the south end.
It looks to be, yeah, it doesn't at Mesquite, and then we have the next signal at East Palm Canyon. And I'm not certain why that one stretch wasn't included in the synchronization.
Could you follow up on that for me?
I will. Thank you.
That is my only question.
Mayor Pro Tem Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor. Tom, you probably can't answer this, so forgive me. So what happens on the CVAG program when certain cities do not participate? How does that really affect the synchronization on cities on either end of it? Does it really screw it up, or?
It doesn't impact Palm Springs that much.
I think I'm talking about Rancho Mirage. Yeah. Aren't they the city that's not
They are.
participating?
They will still have synchronization. It may not be timed with ours. So what will happen is the platoons will stack up at their city limits, and then when they enter in the city of Palm Springs, everything will be back to flowing in a coordinated fashion.
That's the way of everything, isn't it? Not a question. I'm kidding. I'm playing with you, Tom. All right, thank you. I just wondered how, if synchronization makes any sense if all cities aren't going to participate in it, but I've got my answer. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, do we have a motion to approve item, I'm sorry, Councilmember Holstage?
If I have a question for the.
Push your button. Now it is.
For the CCTV there at a number of different intersections, who has access to that data? Is it Palm Springs only that has access to use those cameras?
That's correct.
So, you know, a number of cities are working to protect that type of data from hackers or from outside influences or whatever it is. So are we looking at that?
We have a firewall that isolates the traffic management center and all the cameras that connect to the center from the rest of the city system. There is no way to access it from the outside.
Is it connected to the CVAG system, or it's separate just to the city of Palm Springs?
It is not connected. Nothing is connected to CVAG as of yet. We haven't determined how everything will connect to CVAG. We're still going through the process of how to coordinate their needs with the city's needs.
Thank you.
And I would also indicate that this is not recorded. This is just so that we can look in and monitor and see if there's an issue that we need to do something with the signal. So it's not a recorded that there'd be a record kept.
So we're not saving any
We're
of
not
that
saving,
data?
no.
Thank you. I asked you a technical IT question and you answered it. If I could just say, this is such an exciting project. I'm so glad we're moving forward on this. It's interesting spending a year campaigning and then being here, and the city is already really moving forward on a lot of people's complaints that they don't know about that we're working on. So it's cool to see this moving forward, and I'm happy to vote for it.
Any other questions?
Mayor, I did just want to make a final comment, and this is just is a policy matter. In addition to the CVAG synchronization that's coming for Palm Canyon and what we've seen here, I just want to note that this still is not where we need to be as a city. There's some additional resources that we want to bring forward to council in terms of synchronization studying and fine tuning, and I just want you to know that there will be more because I do think there even still is more room for improvement.
A motion to approve is made by Councilmember Kors, seconded by Councilmember Middleton. Motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next item, item 1I, adopt a resolution identifying the projects to be funded by Senate Bill 1, the Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017 for fiscal year 2018-19. Councilmember Holstage? No, yeah, okay.
It said on, but it
You're
wasn't
on,
on.
yeah.
Thank you. I just had a few questions about Senate Bill 1 and how we can move forward as a city in getting a larger chunk of that funding in the future. So could you explain to me how that works and what we should be looking at?
SB1 is actually distributed via formula based on population and lane miles. So there really is no way to increase our share without increasing our population.
So there are specific monies that we have available to us, and we're using this program, these projects for that monies?
That's correct. The state determines the formula by which it's distributed, and we get an allotment.
And is this all of our allotment? I couldn't quite tell from the staff report.
It is the entire allotment. We had a partial year's allotment last year, which went to roadway rehab projects. This one is being targeted to a safety project. But this is a full year's allotment. It varies year by year. There is an escalation rate that the state put on it. So it'll be incrementally more or less depending on how much people pay for gas. But this is generally about the amount that we'll be receiving.
And I'd like to also point out that this is revenue that's been generated by the new gas tax. So to the extent that gas tax were ever to be repealed, this money would evaporate.
That was my next question, because isn't there an effort to repeal it
Yes.
for the upcoming fiscal year?
There is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Motion to approve made by Councilmember Middleton, seconded by Councilmember Holstage. Motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, City Clerk. Next item, item 1J, the National Wildlife Federation's Monarch Pledge. Councilmember Coors?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a liaison to the Sustainability Commission, and they asked me to bring this forward. And the National Wildlife Federation is doing a monarch butterfly pledge. There are over 260 cities have signed on, and the recommendation is that the mayor sign the pledge. But since there are specific actions, I thought it made sense, one, to share with the public, and for the council just to support that. The monarch butterfly has decreased 90% due to a whole host of reasons, pesticides, et cetera. And we are on the path from Canada to the mountains of Mexico. And so there's desert milkweed is the one place they can lay their eggs. And so it's important that we try and keep monarch butterflies and reestablish habitat for them. They're very important to pollinate local fruit and vegetables, so they're important to farmers. Sustainability Commission is already working on a number of education projects with staff on this. But one of the things we're asked to do is to work to identify at least 3 specific actions that we'll initiate in the next year, which will come back from the Sustainability Commission. So I just wanted to highlight that and let folks know that this is going on. Really appreciate the work of the Sustainability Commission. And I hopefully will all support the mayor signing the pledge, which I know he will do. And that was it. So thank you.
Okay. Motion is approved made by Councilmember Coors, seconded by Councilmember Middleton. Motion is on the floor. Oh, I'm sorry. You didn't show up on the screen.
It showed up on my screen, so I guess
Or-
my screen is having issues tonight. As the millennial, I never have the tech problems over here. I was wondering, and this is probably a question for Councilmember Coors, is the Sustainability Commission picking the specific items that they want us to move forward on, and then we can adopt those later on? I thought this would be a good opportunity to do that if they're not doing it already.
Yeah, so they already have started working on this, and we actually have a retreat on Monday evening about plans, so I will bring back any of those suggestions to share with the council, and if there are specific things we need to adopt, bring them back for the council's consideration.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, motion is on the floor. I was watching. I think Lisa was pushing.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, next item, item 1K, 1 kilo, approve the submittal of the nomination of the Palm Springs International Airport Terminal Building to the National Register of Historic Places. Councilmember Holstage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a question of staff, if I may. I support preserving our historically significant airport. I just had some technical questions about how difficult it would be for future improvements or future expansions, so we can think about that in the next 50 years of the use of our airport.
Responding to the question, Mr. Mayor, in terms of how difficult it would be to do in the future, one thing I want to say is that under the adopted airport master plan, all of the improvements that are anticipated under that plan will not be affected by this designation. So going beyond the adopted master plan for the airport at some point in the future, should we choose to further expand it, the national designation will have much less impact than the local designation. For the local designation, any changes to the west facade of the building require approval by our Historic Site Preservation Board. However, outside of that specific area of the airport, they do not have jurisdiction. On the national level, the improvements or expansions would be reviewed as part of what's called a Section 106 review under the National Environmental Protection Act. It would not have the degree of scrutiny that our local Historic Site Preservation Board would have had. So consequently, in answer to your question, is that it should not have a significant impact on future expansion plans.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Motion is made by Councilmember Coors, seconded by Councilmember Holstage. Motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, City Clerk. Next item, public hearings. First item, item 2A, public hearing under Section 53083 of the California Government Code to approve a hotel operating covenant between the City of Palm Springs and Cahuilla Church, LLC, a Nevada Limited Liability Company, New Church 2, LLC, a Nevada Limited Liability Company, and Werwer 1000, LLC, a Nevada Limited Liability Company for development of the Auberge Hotel, and approval of a resolution extending the expiration of land use entitlements consistent with the Hotel Operations Incentive Program and Operating Covenant. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This public hearing, you previously had discussions and approved the hotel incentive for the Auberge Hotel, the entitlements that have come before you in the past. You had agreed to the hotel incentive plan. As part of that process now, we do need to bring the actual covenant. So what's before you this evening is the actual covenant to formalize that incentive plan. As part of your direction, it needed to be a Auberge type only, but also the key thing was this was going to renovate a blighted area of the downtown, which was the former Orchid Tree Hotel. That being said, what is before you is the ordinance 75% of hotel incentive. The developer has asked, as you see outlined in the staff report, that be modified, and he's here this evening and can explain to you why his request for that modification and why it would be important for him and for his project. And so that, Mayor, we recommend that we get the presentation from the applicant, and then you could open up the hearing, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Do we have questions of staff prior to opening public hearings? Councilmember Middleton.
Dr. Reddy, there are a number of projections in here regarding transit occupancy taxes to be paid and the value of the rooms. And I just want to ask, are these numbers projections that city staff has put together and audited, or have they been audited by city staff, or are they projections that are coming from the applicant without any review by city staff?
They're coming from the applicant. Obviously, we reviewed them. You know, again, they're estimates, and I think obviously Mr. Weintraub can address more fully the data that he provided. And so with that, Mr. Richard Weintraub is with us, who is the developer, and he will be giving the presentation.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to ask these questions now, and it'll give the developer an opportunity to hear them as well and hopefully respond, but directly to you. In a request like this, what I see this as is really just a diversion of dollars that the developer doesn't have to put out now, but is pretty much committing to bringing down the line. What occurs in a situation where this hotel ceases to exist, or this developer no longer, well, I'm guessing in the second question, it's a covenant that will run with the hotel, but if the hotel ceases to exist. The other question I'm having is, I worry about precedents almost in reverse in this case. So since this program is pretty much closed at this point, other than those that took advantage of it originally, what would keep people who are already in this program from coming back and making this request? And how would we not be able to give it to them, given that we might do it in a case like this?
Well, a couple things. One, you're approving covenants for each project. So the covenant that's approved is what they've been granted. Now, certainly council can choose to modify any covenant if you would desire to, but there's certainly no reason for you to actually make such a modification. Part of the reason I think in this case, from a city's perspective, from the city's interest, is that is a blighted area in the downtown that's been that way for over 10 years. That's one. That it removes that blight with a project that is arguably one of the highest end hotels that the city would have. So that being said, you know, as a policy matter, if you feel that that warrants going extra on an incentive, that's certainly a discretionary choice that you can make.
Dr. Reddy, I understand those issues. My question is about what happens if the hotel ceases to exist, if we in fact allow something like this and the hotel doesn't work.
And what you've directed and what's in the covenant is that the incentive is only there so long as it is an auberge. If, say, for example, the auberge hotel goes away someday, the incentive goes away unless city council chooses to provide that incentive to the next hotel or developer. But again, that would be a city council choice, but it's not automatic.
Okay, and a follow-up question then. In a situation where the hotel were to fail and the property was then purchased for another purpose, would the city simply be out that money that was diverted?
But potentially, yes.
Okay, so that's the risk in this.
Right. The other side of that, the flip side of it is now you've got a property that's renovated and likely to fall into the hands of a developer, a successor developer who actually then can continue for whatever the project's going to be at that point. And the question is, you know, you're still going to be better off than you are today.
Well, Dr. Reddy, I understand. I guess, you know, we're getting into the arguments of the case, but with the value of housing in Palm Springs now, that property may have a higher and better use as housing. We don't know in the future. So that's why my concern is if we divert these dollars for a hotel use that then no longer exists, we're putting a future city at risk. And that's my concern with this. And you're telling me that is a risk in a situation like this?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Coors. Microphone.
Yeah, there it goes. For the city attorney. Hi. Hi, Eddie.
Hi.
I know we've talked about this a little, but can you share, are there ways, drafting ways to address the concern Mayor Pro Tem Roberts raised? If 10 years come down, there was 100% TOT for 10 years, it was going to be paid back, and the project stops being a hotel or goes under, is there any mechanism to recover the money that we're owed?
You could make a contract to do just about anything. So the answer is yes. We could install, if the developer was amenable to particular agreements to address that potentiality. We could come up with scenarios per the council's direction with the developer's agreement or acquiescence and memorialize those.
Obviously, if the LLC went bankrupt, that wouldn't do us much good. So I'm wondering if there's a way to have something that runs with the land. So whoever bought the property would owe us that money back.
The covenant will run with the land, and it does specifically relate, as Dr. Reddy indicated, to an auberge hotel. So that hypothetically, if there was a fall off with respect to the developer's company and somebody else was able to sub in as the operator of the auberge, hypothetically it would extend. If you're asking with another operator, that's different.
I'm actually asking sort of what the Mayor Pro Tem was asking. Let's say 10 years goes by with 100% TOT, that we're owed that extra 25% over the next 20 years as proposed, and it becomes housing, condos. Can you craft something where whoever the next owner of that property is would owe that money back to the city?
The answer is sure, we could draft that. It might make the property very difficult or a little bit more difficult to alienate, but
there's a way to protect the city we can come up with.
If that's something that the council wants to do and the developer's agreeable, we'll figure it out.
I would also know another way to potentially look at that is, let's just say the auberge went away and it's built as a hotel and it continues as a hotel with the new hotel operator. In essence, you are going to be paid back through alternately because the whole incentive goes away, so you're getting all that 75% back in TOT.
I'm sorry, Mayor Protem.
Follow-up question on the same issue. So Councilman Kors asked the question that I wanted to go to was, is there a mechanism in a situation like this where we're dealing with an LLC and it goes under, and we talk about maybe attaching this debt to the parcel or to the property, which what I heard your response, or yours, Dr. Reddy, is that now we have a property that has this giant debt on it. Isn't this a situation where we would be smarter to maybe get a personal guarantee from the developer, where the developer's asking us to take a big risk like this? Wouldn't this be a situation where it's outside of the LLC and it shouldn't necessarily be part of the parcel if the parcel no longer is owned by this person?
Sure, that's hypothetically possible. I want to emphasize what Dr. Reddy stated, if I heard him correctly, and he's right, if I heard him correctly. If this particular company goes under and we've extended all of those dollars in that 100% manner being requested, the upside of the developer going under and any fall off with respect to the auberge would be that we no longer have to share the TOT, and any operator would be, in effect, operating without the benefit of the covenant. Again, that might diminish the value of the asset out of bankruptcy or whatever other eventuality might occur, but we're certainly able to address those potential events. And if the council has that concern, but it wants to move this project forward, we can engage the developer, you can engage the developer, I should say, in that dialogue tonight. And if we can't reach an agreement, we'll take whatever direction the council has to sharpen pencils and put as much ink to this thing as we need to.
Thank you, Eddie.
Dr. Reddy, it says on page 15 of the staff report that the Palm Springs Municipal Code allows for an increase in the percent of the adjusted tax rate for no longer than the first 2 years of the participation in the incentive program. This is asking for 10, but it says that this can be allowed under the city's charter authority. Could you sort of define how that, I mean, if the code allows us, we could, according to the code, we can do this for 2 years, but going to 10 requires some sort of extraordinary action. Could you describe what that is?
Actually, the code is what the guidelines of the project are. Council clearly can change those guidelines, and you would be doing that in terms of this covenant. So in essence, you're changing it through the mechanism of the covenant.
And on a legal level, we're not asking you to amend the municipal code. If there's going to be an extension of these additional incentives, council has the authority to do that. It's been noticed to the public, so anyone interested in this matter certainly could be here to make their comment. Obviously, the developer has been very clear in communicating to us what it would like to see happen, and now it's up to the 5 of you.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff before we open the public hearing? Okay, we will open the floor for public comment. The applicant has up to 5 minutes to present his case, and if requested, he will have 2 minutes available at the end for rebuttal. So you have 5 minutes, Mr. Weintraub.
Thank you. My name's Richard Weintraub, and I'm the developer of the Auberge Hotel, also known right now as the Orchid Tree Hotel. This was a inauspicious beginning to my hearing tonight because all I heard about was bankruptcy and losing the hotel and all that stuff. And I know, of course. I work very hard to try to avoid that situation. I've been through 2 recessions, 91 through 94 and 2008 through 11. And I survived them both. Didn't say I didn't get beat up, but I survived them both. Couple of things to address the council members' questions. First, Councilman Roberts, your questions about precedents, because I'm very hyper aware of that in everywhere I work. And I can explain why I don't think this is precedent setting in any way. Aside from dealing with the significant blight issue, aside from dealing with the fact that currently the property could be developed right now as condominiums or as a hotel, we are building not just the finest hotel
and I say finest in a really objective way, that's ever been built in Palm Springs, but also in the Coachella Valley. We are spending almost $60 million, about $800,000 a room to build this hotel. And we are taking on an extraordinary amount of risk and passion and personal and financial capital to do that. So everyone in the Valley has wanted auberge or an auberge-like operator, Mandarin Oriental or something, and they decided to land with me in Palm Springs, not down in Indian Wells, not in Rancho Mirage, not anywhere else, but in Palm Springs. And you have a copy of the agreement which says that they cannot go anywhere in the Valley, no matter how successful this is, but Palm Springs. So we have an exclusive on a California-centric operator that's rated constantly as the top operator in the country or one of the top 3 in Palm Springs and Palm Springs only. The second thing is that we're restoring the Class 1 historical structures, primarily, aside from the 8 bungalows, and it says 10 here in the report, but it's 8, which I allowed to be designated willingly and happily Class 1, but also the church, which went through that horrible fire on September 16th a few years ago. And instead of tearing it down, we've gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure that the church does not get torn down. In one of our earlier iterations, we were building out of the church in a Renzo Piano type style. We heard from the historic committee, we heard from the neighbors, we heard from everybody in Palm Springs that this church was a beacon of Palm Springs. They wanted to see it restored to look as much as it did in 1935 when it was finished. And that's exactly what we're doing. The church will be the banquet, restaurant, and spa facility for the hotel. We are spending several millions of dollars extra to maintain and restore the church so it looks like it was done in 1935. I believe most developers, if they couldn't afford to do something like this, would have just torn the church down. That's what my insurance company has asked me to do. That is what people in my office have asked me to do, and that is what is probably the more sane thing to do. But I'm passionate about restoration. I'm passionate about this project. So the precedence here is that we are restoring a vitally important Class 1 structure. We are restoring the bungalows. We are building the most expensive and highest end operator product ever built in the Coachella Valley. We are getting rid of the blight, and I could go on and on. I think those are things that if someone wanted to come to you in the future, I can't see how they could come to you and ask for those particular, for this additional TOT, of which I'm not asking for any of it to go in my pocket, and it never will, meaning it all gets paid back to the city 100 cents on the dollar. I don't see a high likelihood that this could ever be converted from a hotel into condominiums for someone to tear down land to do such. They would buy a different product than this. And third, the covenant, as we said, runs with the land. So as long as it's an auberge or hopefully a 5-star, 6-star luxury hotel, the city will continue to collect TOT tax. When Councilwoman Middleton asked initially about whether this had been audited or not, I hired Alan Coton, who works for the County of Los Angeles and many, many, many cities. He has the utmost respect. Jay knows Alan very well. I believe that they've known each other for many years. He doesn't put pen to paper or anything down that he doesn't firmly believe in. He's not a consultant that you can ask or tell him what to do. I believe in the city's own report, taking in the higher sales tax than we even anticipated because of what was passed. If this were condominiums and built now, I already ran out of 5 minutes, yikes. We would generate zero. Even with zero TOT tax being generated, we're generating $584,000 a year in ancillary taxes to the city. So over 10 years, it's twice as much as what the differential could be on this TOT rebate, from what I believe, which will then get repaid back over time, over the next time period. I'm available for any questions. I'm sure you'll have them. If you don't mind, I'll leave my stuff right here. Or should I stand here? Or?
No, just step back because we have public speakers.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Weintraub. Our next public speaker, we only have one lined up, off top Dada. If anyone else wishes to speak on this subject, please turn in a card to the city clerk now.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Aftab Dada, speaking on behalf as the President of Palm Springs Hospitality Association, Chairman of PS Resorts, as well as the ownership group of the Hilton Palm Springs. The entire colleagues of mine, all of them are unanimously opposed to granting this developer anything more than 75% of the TOT. Just to let you know that any new product that comes in the market, it is going to take market share from other properties. And in this case, this property would take market share from the Kimpton, the La Serena, as well as the Holiday House and the Ingleside Inn. In other words, you're going to be cannibalizing your revenues for the general fund for the TOT. I also wanted to let you know that if the developer wants to have 100% of the TOT, I have a formula that I came up with that if he exceeds, and he just mentioned that the projections are done by somebody that is fully qualified and never puts his name, give him the incentive if he exceeds those projections, and he can have the 25% of the excess. Just to remind you that the city is not in the lending business, and we should not set a precedent by giving him the 100% for the 10 years and then him repaying it back without interest. So I just wanted to let you know that it will not be fair to all the other hoteliers, and it won't be an even playing field. Thank you.
Mr. Dada, Mayor Pro Tem had a question for you.
Yes.
Thank you, Aftab. I just want to clarify one thing that you said early on. You said that the Hospitality Association does not support this. And you mentioned that they're going to take business from the other hotels, and that's a given. Help me with this. I don't think you were saying that the Hospitality Association doesn't support this because it's going to take business away. What you were saying is you don't support this because of the 100% tax rebate?
Absolutely. We are in full favor of this blighted area being developed with the world-class Auberge Hotel, but we are opposed to granting the developer anything more than the 75% that he's requesting.
Because the association feels that it would be the city lending him something that others didn't get. I wasn't quite clear on why the association was against this.
Absolutely, and it won't be a level playing field. Just to let you know that we finally got, after 30 years, a full-service hotel in this destination, and we granted him 75%. What will it stop from other developers that will be coming in requesting and demanding the same? And again, market share definitely will be taken, and that will cannibalize your TOT coming in for the first few years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, any other speakers from the public, City Clerk?
None, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other public speakers, the developer, Mr. Weintraub, you have 2 minutes of rebuttal.
I'll use my time more judiciously this time. So I'd like to rebut what this gentleman just said. First of all, this will not cannibalize. This will do just the opposite. The average daily rate of Auberge Hotel, and I say this right now, is probably 50 to 75% higher than the Kimpton or the Holiday House or the Ingleside Inn. In fact, we will raise the bar and raise the ADR in the neighborhood, therefore increasing TOT by providing first-class spa and restaurant facilities for a lot of these small boutique hotels like the Del Marcos that do not have, great eating facilities, Holiday House, which does not have a great eating facility, et cetera. But to say that we are at the same economic level of the Kimpton, which is a beautiful hotel, with an ADR of $400 or $500 a night, the average Auberge ADR in Northern California is $800 to $1,300 a night. Same with their hotel in Aspen, same with their hotels in Mexico, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no comparison. They are not rated 5-star. All of Auberge hotels are 5-star. All of their ADRs are completely different. So this is just completely untrue. The second thing is, I see that tonight this was publicly noticed and everything, and unlike the controversy surrounding the Virgin Hotel, where there was a lot of people coming in and a lot of opposition and everything, I see one person in the audience tonight speaking to this matter. I think that speaks to the fact that everyone I have spoken to, including the head of the Tourism Bureau, including the head of the convention, that have all told me that a hotel like Auberge will bring in a lot more business because it is such a high level that the CEOs and CFOs and COOs of companies will be more inclined to bring business to Palm Springs because they will have a place to stay and then distribute out the rooms to the rest of their staff. But the fact is that this does not cannibalize the other rooms in the city.
Thank you, Mr. Weintraub. Do we have no other speakers? We will close the public hearing. We have now questions of the developer, Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you. And again, I've been supporting this hotel for a very long time. I was able to vote for it on the Planning Commission. So you've identified you've got a $60 million total budget for this project. And if I'm reading the numbers correctly, the 10 years that you're asking for to go to 100% rebate back equates to approximately $2.8 million in money that you would receive, that the city would then receive in years 11 through 30. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what we're talking about here in very specific numbers is by giving you this at interest-free, you're gaining basically what you would get if you went out and borrowed this $2.8 million, which, as I understand, would be somewhere in the 4, 5, 6% interest rate that you would have to pay on that $2.8 million if you got it in from a bank as opposed to getting it interest-free from the city. Is that correct?
The reason for the money is not to not borrow money. It's to, as everyone knows, interest rates are actually increasing right now. Thanks. And the lending criteria, the least popular lending area for banks right now are hotels, hospitality. Banks are very nervous about those. I'm sure the city hears about that on hotels that haven't started. So it's really just an additional cushion of collateral for the lender to get more comfortable, because when I was in front of you, they were lending up to 70% of construction, and now it's down to, in resort areas, 50 to 55% and maybe less for a hotel of this expense. So it's really to create more of a collateral cushion for the lender rather than not borrowing the money.
So you're now finding that you can get 50 to 55% of that $60 million from a bank, and you're going to have to raise either through your own private funds or through other investors the balance of that money.
That's absolutely correct.
And you're asking the city to give you the $2.8 million.
I'm asking the city to forego 25% of the TOT and get it repaid over time. I just want to keep clarifying that it's not, I'm not asking for any money that will not be repaid.
I guess what I'm struggling with is, are the margins so tight that that $2.8 million, frankly, it's just the value of what it would cost you to borrow that money is the difference between this project succeeding or failing?
No, that is not what this is about. If you look at the auberge pro forma, which I believe is in the package, this hotel should be a very successful hotel, and we hope it is. But we also haven't had a recession for a very long period of time. We know that's coming, whether it's next year or the following year, or God knows what our president's going to do next month. So it's really to help weather the storm during incredibly difficult times, and also to get, lenders are like lemmings and they get very scared, and this is really just to give them more assurance that there's going to be comfort here. But the hotel should do pretty well. I think it'll do very well because I think it'll have no competition.
And would the lenders be equally impressed if the city of Palm Springs, not that I think we should get into the banking business, was to impose an interest on this money, if just like anyone else who's loaning money to someone would ask for?
That's your prerogative, obviously.
All right. I can think of a lot of other questions, but I suspect my colleagues have many, so I'm going to defer for a minute.
Okay, thank you. A couple questions. I've been following this project for several years, and I watched you work with the neighbors on a lot of their concerns and change the event space and make it smaller and compromise and work with the parking. So it's really been impressive to watch you work on this hotel, and the architecture that you've come up with is beautiful. But this latest request made me sort of do a little bit more thinking on this, and trust but verify. I just have a couple questions. One, looking around and talking to people in neighboring cities, I know in 2015, the city of Rancho Mirage approved the Thunderbird Resort and Spa, which was described as a resort and spa will be a 6-star, ultra-luxurious resort with the finest spa destination in the United States. Situated close to Sunnyland Center and the gardens in Rancho Mirage, this development will resemble the great resorts of Europe and Asia and is projected to be the finest of its kind in the United States. And that was approved unanimously by the City Council in Rancho Mirage. However, that project did not get done, and it's the land, I believe, is on for sale again. What happened to that project, and why was you were able to get the funding for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We made it very clear to the city of Rancho Mirage in the beginning that this was an extremely ambitious project that required EB-5 financing. We had commitments for EB-5 financing. I don't know if everyone knows what that is, but that's where people, in return for getting a visa, invest $500,000 into a project that has to generate 10 direct or indirect jobs. The EB-5 program has pretty much dried up in the last year and a half. That's public information and easily checked. The Congress of the United States has not extended the EB-5 program so that it's not available. That's where a vast majority, including the Waldorf Astoria in Beverly Hills, if anyone has seen that, was built with EB-5. The new Fairmont in Century City is being built with EB-5. Several of the most luxurious hotels in New York were built with EB-5 financing. That has dried up, and because of that, and that property is also, I am only a partner in that project, unlike this project where I do not have any partners. We made the decision to move forward and sell the property because the financing was not available, or the equity tranche of the financing was not available.
Okay, thank you. And also looking around the valley, I know you purchased the Indio Mall, which is also an iconic property, in 2003. And talking to some of the city council members in Indio, I understand there was a lot of plans for that, but after 7 years, you sold it in 2010. How come you weren't able to carry through with that Indio Mall?
Well, the Indio Fashion Mall, as iconic as one wants to think of it, was not an iconic piece of property. It was completely blighted. I don't want to get into the racial politics that were going on in Indio at the time, or with the then city manager, Glenn Southard, but Eddie Kotkin was the city attorney at the time and probably has a lot of interesting memories of Indio. But the city had done something very interesting in the backyard of this property. When I purchased the property, the city had said that they would contribute, just like Rancho Mirage did with the river, the 20 acres in the back. Prior to that, about 20 years before, in the middle of the night, literally, the city had bulldozed an African-American neighborhood, leaving only a church standing because that was not able to have been bulldozed. And under a federal decree, was ordered to pay back millions and millions of dollars and not further condemn the properties in the back. During my ownership in the back, of the front, I was constantly assured that the city was always on the verge of getting the rest of the properties in the back. They were never able to fully acquire the properties in the back. I brought many extraordinary tenants. They told me they were only at the time interested in a Nordstrom's type of shopping center. I hired the Jardy Partnership. We did a beautiful project, but the city was never able to deliver on the land in the back. And Eddie is here tonight, and he can verify that.
Okay, thank you. Another question, in my research, the Sportsman's Lodge in Studio City in Los Angeles, you purchased that in 2007. And I was reading an article published in 2015, and after several years on that, that project also stalled, and the facility is still operating, but I see the average room rate's like $124 a night, so it's not exactly a high-end property. But why were you unable to get the financing and complete that Sportsman's Lodge?
I think that you have misinformation in stating that.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh. LA Times, okay.
I don't think the LA Times said that.
Okay, did you purchase the Sportsman's
Yes.
Lodge? Okay.
Yes.
But it wasn't completed?
What wasn't completed?
The renovation of the Sportsman's
We actually have the plans. We have finalized our lease with Equinox for the highest end flagship Equinox, along with some other very high-end tenants. The hotel was completely got an initial renovation. The ADR at the hotel is way higher than $124 per night. You may find it on a Tuesday night, a room available on Orbitz or something. The hotel, in its comp set, I believe, leads in occupancy and close to with rate, and is an unbranded hotel. So it doesn't have a Marriott or other brand associated with it. The property is going through a major, very high-end transition in the very near future. The leases are signed. I don't see what the issues are.
Okay, thank you. This was just some of my research. I just want to get some answers on them.
That's fair, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I do want to comment. I think you, and I know you understand, and you met with the Economic Development Subcommittee. I mean, obviously, our interest is protecting the city, of course, but I don't want any of that taken that this wouldn't be a fabulous property and project in Palm Springs, and no one wants anything but it to be successful. So we're just looking at those issues, but I want to make sure the public and you hear that. I did have two questions. So one is, when we've done these before, not putting aside the extra TOT for a period of time, but on these projects, the Dream, the Virgin, we put on pretty tight time requirements on construction and completion that seem to be missing here. So just more a staff question. Is there a reason we don't have those here? Because I felt like we really were strict with everyone else who we did these covenants with.
Sure, great question. I'll give you the legal reason, and staff can fill in with the policy aspect of it. From a legal vantage point, all that's here tonight is an operations covenant. In the instance of the Dream, there was an elaborate, if you recall, purchase and sale agreement process. It went on through many iterations, different ownership, and that sale agreement contained those provisions that required the development of the project per the timeline that you're referencing. And also the Virgin, as you recall, was subject to a separate development agreement. So even though Mr. Weintraub's project doesn't have those collateral other agreements, we could certainly incorporate those performance schedule things in this particular document if the council requires them and he's amenable. So that's the legal side of it.
Okay.
In terms of negotiations and policy, I'll defer to staff.
Well, what I would just note on that, Eddie's correct. This is the covenant this was the basic covenant for the improvements. A lot of them were already existing, and so they wouldn't get their TOT unless they finished and completed. Right. So the newer ones we had, like the Kimpton and the Dream, those did have other agreements where the actual deadlines were in. What this has is the deadline of when he has to begin, get the permit to start building, and at that point, the council discussion early on when we did this, as I recall it, if you get to that point, you've got your financing and you spent the millions of dollars on the design, it'd be hard not to finish. But that being said, you certainly could include in this covenant timeframes.
Yeah, I think we can point to projects that have started doing work that are now dormant.
Yes.
And I think especially if we're even thinking about any extra TOT or lending money, however we want to discuss it, not to have timelines to make sure this gets done if we're trying to get a blighted area fixed, to me, would be a mistake. So I think it would be important that we treat people somewhat similarly on that. And, we've seen utilities and construction happen on projects, and then we're now having to get them fenced and landscaped. So that's a concern. Please.
From what I can read, and I could be incorrect, I believe there are already timeframes from where I have to have pulled a permit and started construction that are already in the agreement.
Correct.
But not completion.
But what is, starting construction could be very little, and then it could be dormant.
You're talking about the C of O.
Yeah. So that was one thing. And the second thing is, just because I think it's important for us to know as we're discussing this, if this project doesn't move forward, and we have a clearly uninhabitable building, what happens? What's the time frame? Obviously, you could sell it, but what's the process?
Well, we've got a vacant building ordinance,
Right.
thanks to the city council, and we would enforce that ordinance. The structure would have to be registered as a vacant building and treated as a vacant building. It would have to be compliant with all applicable codes so that it could remain as a vacant building, subject to the boarding requirements as they're reflected in that ordinance. It could, in abstract theory, remain in that form for an undefined period of time, but again, it would have to be compliant with all the codes, and given the state of the nuisance that's out there right now, it's quite a mess, and Mr. Weintraub's correct. He'd be eliminating one of the biggest nuisances that we have anywhere in the city.
But he
would have to address those nuisance conditions in order to comply with the vacant building ordinance.
Okay.
Staff's available if you want to get into more
No,
of the
I just sort of
particulars.
wanted a general, obviously, we don't want to see that sitting there. I don't
And
think
if
anyone
the
does.
project doesn't go forward for some reason, obviously we'll have to have a talk with Mr. Weintraub as the owner of the property regarding what the code requires.
Okay, thank you.
Follow up on Councilmember Corr's question. The current land use entitlement is until May 31st, 2019. So if it doesn't start,
No,
it's in the staff report.
the current land use entitlement actually expires in November of 2018. One of the actions we're asking you to take is to extend.
But the extension is May 31st.
Correct, to make
That's
it
what I meant.
concurrent. That's exactly right.
So if it doesn't make May 2019, then what would happen? You have to come back to us again?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say if he proceeds with just the schedule he's got now and we get milestones along the lines of what Mr. Kors is talking about, he will have long since vested with respect to his entitlements, and he'll have the right to continue with construction. You know what partially built projects look like. We've talked about it in a lot of agenda items. There are code issues there that we would have to address. If I'm not answering any portion of your question, please let me know.
Okay, but this being a historic building also makes any code enforcement a little more difficult because
It sure does, Mr. Mayor.
Like we were talking about the Andes Hyatt, when it didn't move, we were just talking about going in there and bulldozing the thing, but that'd be more difficult to do with an historic building.
The council would have some very tough decisions in that instance, yes.
Okay, Councilmember Middleton. Oh, sorry, Mayor. Councilmember Middleton.
Mr. Weintraub, I just want to follow up on a couple of questions. I believe I heard you say in answer to one of the questions, you have no other investors. You're doing this on your own?
As of now, as of today, yes, currently,
As of
yes.
today.
And since the inception of acquiring the properties.
All right. And so if I'm following the money correctly, you're looking to borrow somewhere in the vicinity of $35 million for this project?
Somewhere around there, yes. It depends what the investment bankers tell me is available at the time that we go out to market.
And that capital, you've not secured those loans at this time?
We couldn't because we don't have our final budgets or our plans.
So that still leaves that approximately $25 million that you're going to be responsible for yourself or either with investors.
That's correct.
You have that kind of capital lying ready?
It's not sitting in my checking account, but wish it was.
We all do.
Yeah, but no, that's our intention. Meaning, do we have that in the bank today? No. But have we accounted for it, and do we plan on having that money? Yes.
So, and we're not a bank, and this is a public hearing, but I know if we were a bank, we'd be sitting across a conference table, and the banker would be asking some pretty tough questions in terms of how you propose to raise that $25 million.
Yeah, those are very fair questions. I can only say that when we talk about timing, I don't know if anyone knows the corner of Sunset and Doheny, the addition project, which is topped out and being finished right now. That was a project of mine. It took 10 years to get that project done and built in the city of West Hollywood. I brought in Marriott and Ian Schrager. To date, I think it's the most expensive, about a $300 million build, and probably the finest, I think the finest hotel in West Hollywood by far. The city's extraordinarily happy about that. You can talk to anyone in West Hollywood about that project. I sold that to Marriott several years ago, but that took 10 years to create and get through the entitlements of that project. And it was worth waiting, according to the city, because they're getting something extraordinary.
So, last question, I think. If you were to get everything you wanted and we were to say yes to your request, when would construction begin? When would it finish?
Okay. Plan should be done by the end of this year, meaning all the working drawings. Once the plans are done, they have to, because there's several different people who are working on the plans, from the landscape to the interiors to the architecture, civil, mechanical, plumbing, et cetera. Then it has to go to the city. And then it's in the city's hands, depending on how good and thorough our plans are, for them to check the plans and turn them back to us with obviously corrections. Then we have to turn them back. During that time, we'll be out for financing, and we will, and we have this May 31st date that we have to meet. It's an aggressive date, but assuming we meet that date, we have been told by people who have bid the project for us generally so far that it's an 18-month all-in build. So say 24 months, so probably 2 years from May 31st, the hotel would open. And we want to open off-season, so that would be a good time for us.
We're talking sometime in 2021?
Correct.
I really do hope it gets built.
So do I.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I am thrilled that you want to do this, and I'm thrilled with the Auberge brand. They're a wonderful brand, and I have faith that you can probably get your financing, whether it's 100% rebate or 75% rebate. Nothing from nothing is nothing, and the city has nothing, is really risking nothing if you don't get off the ground, except now. You know, this incentive program that we did originally, the 75% rebate, was hugely controversial here. And hopefully now most people see that it was a great idea, that it worked, that it brought some great hotels and brands. We now have the Virgin coming to town as well. And that's been great for us and our brand, and obviously one of the things that drew you and Auberge here. My real struggle here, and we bend over backwards for hotels. I mean, I think you've seen that. My struggle is getting nothing back once you open and not seeing any TOT, and that's what hotels bring to a city, and that money is vital to us. That's our blood. That's the blood that runs through our veins. And I just can't in good conscience, unless there's a way to guarantee those dollars back, regardless of your success with this property, I don't feel good about indebting our city that way. Mm-hmm. I really struggle with that. I know our city attorney, Eddie, who you know well, and Dr. Reddy are both experts in crafting safety mechanisms to help developers and to keep us moving forward. I just haven't heard anything yet that makes sense that would keep us safe. And that's our job. That's our first job, is to keep the city safe as we grow. So I'm, in as much as I respect you and I love this project you want to bring, right now I can't support the additional 25%. I definitely support the 75%. That's great. It's a great incentive. But until I hear something different, I just can't stand with this, and I'm sorry.
That's obviously your prerogative, Councilman Roberts. What I'm struggling with and trying to understand is, well, if the project doesn't get built, which is a possibility, right? The land is still there. It's very good. It's very valuable land. I heard questions about what would happen to the land, meaning from a blighted point of view. Obviously, the Class 1 bungalows would be preserved, and then the rest of the property would just be raised. And then another project, whether it's condominiums or a lower end, not low end, but not an Auberge hotel, something will happen to this property. It's too good, it's too well located for something not to happen to it. I was hoping that Mr. Coten's study, which shows that regardless of the TOT tax, the city's getting over $500,000 a year in revenue from this project because of the extraordinary expenditures of the average auberge guest versus a average regular hotel guest. Because of the incremental revenues from property taxes, sales taxes, and other things, that would more than offset the risk of the city not receiving this money, because as we said, there is no risk if the project doesn't get built. If the project gets built, the person who's taken the most risk is myself and the bank, because we've taken a $60 million risk. That the city, in building these ultra-luxury hotels, the risk is really primarily for the developer, meaning for myself. Because if the hotel isn't successful, someone will buy this, whether it's for 50 cents on the dollar or 60 cents on the dollar, and successfully operate it in the future because they won't be carrying that debt, or my equity will have been wiped out. And we've all seen that before, where luxury hotels have changed ownership. We see them change, someone buys them. And the Ritz-Carlton in Rancho Mirage is a perfect example of that happening, when the people came in and bought it for 50 cents on the dollar because of the Lehman bankruptcy, and look how wildly successful it is today, because they don't have to carry that debt burden, nor do they have to take the entrepreneurial risk of building it in the first place, when it was the Ritz-Carlton, then the Lodge, and now back to the Ritz-Carlton. So I'm trying to quantify and understand what the city's risk is as a steward for the city, looking at it from my perspective, looking at your perspective, what risk they're taking by advancing that difference in the 25% of TOT over those years, if that helps get this hotel built. I'm not going to make a more impassioned plea tonight. If the council is not inclined to do it, that's okay. And we'll just see what happens. But I don't see that the city is taking a risk if this hotel actually gets built. I see it as the opposite. Sure.
Sorry, we have a new system we're still trying to get used to. Mr. Weintraub, you know, I've been a big supporter of this project from the very beginning, like I said.
I had a few questions before we go to
Your name didn't pop up. You're not
It's right here on mine.
It's not on mine.
It's on Councilmember
Mine's
Middleton.
the one that counts. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm not showing you.
First, I just want to congratulate you and applaud the vision that it takes, and the bravery to bring a project like this. And I know you've been working a long time with our city, and we're grateful that you're bringing this type of project, and we're hopeful for an auberge hotel here. I think that's really exciting to our city. And so I'm sorry it started out negative for you, but we are concerned about protecting the city. And I can explain to you the risk is that that we do not collect that TOT that we're entitled to, and then that there's a downturn or something out of our control and your control happens, and we're concerned about ever being paid back that amount. And so my question for you is, what can you do to reassure the city that we're protected in those instances?
Yeah, that's something I couldn't give you a direct answer to tonight, because I'm trying to understand how the city quantifiably could not get paid back, other than it shutting its doors forever. As long as it's a hotel, the city will get paid back the money. So the only way it could not get paid back the money, but we could hear from the finance director or somebody else, I'm trying to understand, short of shutting its doors and tearing it down, or just shutting its doors forever, I don't see, if it's operating as a hotel, how the city doesn't get paid back. Maybe if I understood that better, it would help me craft my ability to make the city more comfortable.
Okay. And do you have other controls or other sort of binding contracts in terms of bringing this forward? And apologize, I'm not a developer. And so I have just a few questions about that. Can you explain in basic terms that the public can understand why you're asking for the 100% instead of the 75%, and why you need that for this project to pencil?
Sure. There are a couple of things. One, as you know, this TOT, because it's a smaller hotel, has a different TOT tax than, say, the Virgin or the Kimpton, meaning that the TOT tax on those hotels, I believe, is around 13%, and the TOT tax on this hotel is around 10.9%. I could be off a little bit. So there's a big delta between what the city collects on the TOT tax on the larger hotels versus the smaller hotels versus the convention hotel. The second is that in this time period, the cost of raw materials, raw goods, labor, and everything have gone up tremendously, have way more than what inflation has gone up. And the third thing is that the lending markets, and this is something, and if we table this for tonight or continue this, you can investigate, have very much changed. So we have extreme rising costs. We have a hotel that's already way outside of the norm, meaning if I was here building another Hyatt or another just nice mid-scale hotel, one, I would be cannibalizing other hotel rooms, and two, we wouldn't need that difference because instead of spending $800,000 a room, we'd be spending $300,000 to $400,000 a room, and we wouldn't be saving the church, and we would be doing a whole different program. So it's all of these additional costs, timing, and financing challenges that made this to be, that brought this ask in front of you tonight. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Thank you. And looking at ways that we can be assured that it will go forward and we could recoup the money that we're lending out, if you will, for the TOT at least. So do you have a contract with Auberge that requires you to go forward on certain terms?
I believe the city, do you have a copy of the management agreement? No. I know that you have a copy or confirmation from Auberge that that we have signed our final and full management agreement. It is required that we build the hotel to Auberge standards. It is required that we provide extraordinary luxuries and amenities to the guests, and Auberge has full control over how that guest is treated. Hotel management companies operate off of gross revenue of the room, meaning they make money whether or not the owner makes money. So, for example, Marriott, I think, owns fewer than 10 hotels out of tens of thousands of hotels that they own now with Starwood. I don't know if Auberge owns more than one hotel. They manage them, they collect the money, they maintain their standards. Even at a loss to me, they still maintain the standards. They will not compromise their standards regardless of what happens to the bottom line.
Thank you. And to city staff, have we received that? I haven't seen it, I don't believe, and it's not in our packet that I found in the 200 and some pages.
Well, what I can tell you is I don't have it at my fingertips. This has been a lot of years going through this. Yes, it does exist, and we can get that for the city council.
Thank you. And then I have another question, and so I'm looking at the pro formas that you provided and the return analysis here. I saw that you had written in one of your letters to the city that a major facelift for the hotel will be required in the first 10 years of operation. And so a significant remodel is projected in year 10. However, that seems to coincide with when the city would start receiving TOT to be paid back. And so my question is that included here, the additional cost for the remodel? And how would that work to guarantee that the city also starts to receive the return on the TOT invested?
Sure. The TOT tax is a gross receipts tax, as we know. So that's taken off the top of, it's a separate charge, mandated charge. So the city gets that regardless of what goes down into our operations, for example. I don't know if you're following.
I understand how TOT works, but my question to you is what is guaranteeing that when at a time that you have to invest a ton of money back into the hotel, that will be sustainable in the numbers that you gave to us?
Okay, well, the city, the operator takes what's called an FF&E reserve. Every good hotel and every brand has that. So from 3 to 4% of your gross revenue every year gets reserved for furniture, fixtures, and equipment replacement. In the higher end luxury brands, what you may see a bit additionally is if a thing has changed where a shower needs to look a certain way, or it needs to be a rain head shower, or the room needs marble on the floor. That's the difference and the delta that goes into that. And that's usually anticipated starting about 4 or 5 years before what the brand is going to require from you. And then you've got to set aside the money for that. But we can't set aside the TOT tax for that because that has nothing to do with us.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. As I started to say, that I've been really a fan of this project from the very beginning, even before I was on the council. But on page 17 of the staff report was what really got me concerned, and that's where it says in paragraph 4A, after it talks about requesting the 100% TOT, staff report says the developer represents that absent the program rebate, the planned Alberts project cannot be built. So the staff report here is saying that if we don't approve the 100%, that you cannot build the hotel. Is that correct?
Can you direct me on page 17?
What
where it
page?
says that?
Page 17.
Is it paragraph?
Paragraph 4A.
Oh, 4A.
Paragraph 3C talks about at the public hearing, the developer requests a rebate of 100% of the adjusted TOT for the first 10 years. Pardon? Yeah, out on page 17.
Yes, I see, it's the first line of 4A. Yes, I have said to the city that I think it's very vitally important for this additional rebate to be given to help with the lenders based on what my investment bankers have said.
Okay, so that's what, I mean, I'm not a developer, never have been, but having been in here for 2.5 years, I'm very conservative on looking at development projects because of what I've seen in the past. But that's when what piqued my concern here was if someone says, I cannot build this now unless I get a 100% rebate, it makes me wonder if you're that concerned about getting the financing, if you don't get this 100% TOT rebate, that if it's just going to be very difficult to get the funding if you don't get this 100%, or even if you do get this 100%, because it looks like it may be barely financeable. That's why I become skeptical of this, because you're saying if you don't get 100%, you can't build the hotel.
Mr. Mayor, I can assist. The language from the public hearing notice, which is the language that you're quoting right now, talks about the program rebate with a capital P. The program rebate is the 75%. And I think Mr. Weintraub would definitely very quickly concur that if you don't give him the 75%, there's no way this project gets built.
Of course.
Yes. Okay, but this is right after the paragraph talking about asking 100%. Okay.
Correct, but I apologize if it's written in legalese. The capital P is a reference to the 75%.
Okay, so if the council moves ahead with what we had planned originally with the 75% TOT rebate, you're not saying you can't, so you will be able to move ahead.
That's up to Mr. Weintraub, not me.
Right. I haven't said, I'm not going to misrepresent anything in front of the council. I cannot guarantee that even with the 100%, that this will allow this extraordinary type of project to be built. If you had asked me 2 years ago, I would say the chances and the likelihood were much higher because of the loans to value and investment banks' strong appetite for this type of product. But I can assure you that it will absolutely help get the project going if that's going to happen. I am going to spend out of my own pocket, and have so far, well over $2 million betting, $2 million on plans, not on the dirt, not on what I've spent, not on everything to date, betting that that's going to happen. So if it doesn't happen, then those plans go in the garbage, the project doesn't get built, and it becomes a different project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to ask our Economic Development Director sort of to weigh in here. You've sort of reviewed the numbers, the expected, room night costs, the sales tax costs. I know you reviewed the study that Mr. Weintraub provided. Can you give us your insights, please?
Absolutely. The numbers do appear reasonable, given that we're only accounting for 64 rooms and the visitors staying in those rooms. Staff did question and discount the expenditure rate of each of the projected visits at $1,000 per visit, I believe it was. And we thought that might be high, but still, even discounting that from $584,000 additional per year to the city in non-TOT revenue, meaning tremendous increase in property value. Sales tax is where we thought it was maybe a little stronger than we might agree with.
And what did you, it was 1,000 per guest per night that was expected to be spent, and what did you discount that to in your analysis?
Well, we didn't discount it to a specific number,
Okay.
but the total is $584,000 projected to be additional revenue to the city. Even at $500,000, that's a significant gain for the city.
And that doesn't include the room, right? That's 1,000
That's
additional
correct.
dollars per guest?
That's
It's
correct.
not per guest, it's per room.
Per room,
I believe.
for two
and,
people?
An average, about 1.8. The difference is that there's a lot of leakage sometimes to other cities, which we're trying to keep, obviously, for the people to spend in Palm Springs. So that's hopefully why, as there's more retail options, that people have more to spend on retail in Palm Springs.
I would, I mean, and Jay, your take on this, and I could see how 1,000 per room in a place like Napa where people buy cases of wine, there's very expensive restaurants. That doesn't exist in Palm Springs. I mean, maybe our cannabis industry will start bringing in those numbers. But I don't see people being able to buy and spend that kind of money here at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Jay.
Food and beverage would have been perhaps an area where high expenditures would have been seen, and the developer will be bringing in a restaurant serving not just the hotel patrons, but also patrons staying in other close-by restaurants.
And then, and I don't know what I haven't landed on anything yet, but serving as a liaison to our hospitality association, I sort of heard their concerns on doing this and a sense of unfairness. And same with the general managers of most of the hotels. But in that conversation with the other general managers, this idea of if you hit what you say you will, and then if you do, then doing the 25, but only if you do, doing the 25% loan rebate, whatever we're calling it, for 10 years. Is that something that would work for you?
I believe we had discussed that as an option before, because we were open to doing something like that. The problem with that is that it then puts the city in the position of a significant audit every year, looking back as to what the reasonable return threshold is for the investment, and then looking at the threshold to collect that delta. So in looking at it in reverse, if we're wildly successful, then then this will not have been necessarily needed, and the city will absolutely get paid back. If we are not necessarily as successful, but still do well, but we don't meet a reasonable rate of return on the investment, then this would be used to plug that gap. And we had talked about that, but it's very difficult to quantify it into real numbers.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was a challenge that the subcommittee had. But I think, and Mr. Dada will correct me if I'm wrong, what he was suggesting is that if you hit your amount per room, so much easier to audit than how much you're putting back into the hotel. If you hit what you say you will, we'll know it from the TOT, right? That we're going to audit anyway. If you hit those numbers, then I think at least the GMs were comfortable with doing it at that point. So that may be an option. If you at least hit what you say you will in room revenue, just the room revenue, that then you would get the 25% back, additional back.
It's something we can look at. I'm not discounting anything. I heard tonight that there was some talk about giving incentive to some of the small hotel owners who have not received the benefit necessarily of the incentive program that the larger hotels did to get them to do that. I think that's something, as an aside, should absolutely happen. What I prefer to do, because the spirit in which I came to ask for this, and because of the extreme hesitancy, or not really necessarily hesitancy, but just the uncomfortableness that this has created, I would rather just either continue this so I can decide whether or not to pull it and just let the chips fall where they may, because this is a passion project of mine. I do other projects that are not as passionate, and I'd rather table this and really think about it, because you all are doing an extraordinary job in protecting the city and being fiduciaries for the city, and I welcome that, because my significant investment in this city depends on the city operating successfully in the future. I can't be a wildly extraordinary high-end hotel in a city that doesn't function properly. So I thank you for that. But I'm just not comfortable at this time, given that there's so many unanswered questions that everyone on the council still has, with proceeding with this at this time. So if the council doesn't mind, I'd rather just either remove this from this 2A or whatever we call it, and let me think about this.
Just a second, Mayor Pro Tem, you had requested to speak. Still want to speak?
Well, yeah, briefly. I mean, I just want to say to you, and I don't mean this in a glib way at all, this seems like a very small amount of money, especially spent over 10 years, given 10 years. I mean, it seems like a drop in the bucket for what you're going to invest and what this hotel is going to mean to you and what it will potentially mean to the city. And I don't want you to perceive us as not supportive. We're excited about this. I've heard that all the way down the line, and I goes back on this as the Planning Commission as well. And we really want you, and we really want this project. We just need a way to feel safe about it. And, if anybody can come up with a way that we can help you with this, and at the same time secure the safety of the city, that's all we're after. Using not your argument against you, but your comment. You're not alone, I'm sure, and I can tell you I agree with you that we're due for an adjustment in the economy. And so this becomes even a bigger issue, because if the economy were to trip and stumble even close to what it did last time, these TOT dollars are going to become more important than anything at that time. If we were on the build, as we have been over the last 5-8 years, I'd feel a lot more comfortable standing by you in something like this. But because I agree that we're probably headed into a bit of a downturn, it makes me even a little more secure. So I'll let my colleague move where she's headed and honor your request. But just don't leave this dais thinking we don't want you here, because that's not the case.
Thank you.
Councilmember Middleton.
Or we could just renotice it when Mr. Weintraub's comfortable with bringing it back.
Sure. Thank you very much.
And if I could just...
Councilmember Holstich.
I could just echo that while we have you, because we just grilled you for an hour or so. The city isn't in the banking business, but we are in the investment business, and the TOT program has shown how the amount that we've invested in our city has created a huge economic benefit to the city. So I think that there are definite benefits that you're bringing with your project. I'm excited about the revenue. I'm excited about the tax dollars. I'm excited about the jobs, and a lot of other things, and just putting the Palm Springs on the map even more in terms of a luxury resort location. So we are excited about the project, and you just have to understand where the city is and where the residents are, is that we've been doing this TOT program, and the residents want to be very careful about how those monies are invested, and so how the city is protected going forward. So those are the only interests that we're representing, and we're grateful for you to be here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, would Councilmember Middleton be amenable to modifying her motion so that we're tabling as opposed to continuing tabling this matter to a date uncertain. The reason I say that is we want the administrative record to be clear. This hearing will be part of the future hearing as well.
Okay, right. Okay, so the motion is made to table this until a date uncertain, made by Councilmember Middleton, seconded by Councilmember Coors. Motion is on the floor.
Sorry, motion passes 5-0.
Thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Weintraub. Public hearing item 2B, amendment to Class 1 historic site designation of the Oasis Hotel to list the Oasis Hotel Dining Hall located at 211 to 219 South Palm Canyon Drive and the commercial storefront and casita building located at 121 South Palm Canyon Drive as contributing elements designed by Master Architect Lloyd Wright, Zone CBD case HSPB 10. Staff report, please.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, this application is being brought forward to you this evening by the City of Palm Springs at the direction of the Historic Site Preservation Board. The Oasis Hotel property was designated as a historic site back in 1985. This request would expand the designation to additional buildings that are on the site and also at the Village Green property. Let me start by going to the original site plan for the Oasis Hotel property. Looking at the drawing that is there on your screens, the top of the drawing is north, and that's Tahquitz Canyon there on the north side of the screen. And then on the right-hand side of the screen is South Palm Canyon. The Oasis Tower, which was designed by Lloyd Wright, the son of Frank Lloyd Wright, has already been designated and was designated by the city in 1985. Also, as part of the Oasis Hotel complex is the McCallum Adobe, the original home of John McCallum. That was designated by the city also in 1985, but has since been moved to the Village Green site where it sits currently. And then you can see the rest of the buildings on site made up the Oasis Hotel. Of those buildings, many have been removed, but there are 3 in particular that are of interest to the city in terms of historic designation that weren't included in the 1985 designations. Those include the Oasis Dining Hall, which is there at the top of your screen. That structure has been moved in pieces to the Village Green, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in just a moment. There also exist currently, in their current location, the storefront buildings that you see there on the lower right. Those are in existence today on South Palm Canyon and are being used as retail shops. And then there's also the casita building, which sits just behind the tower. That is in its original location and is still in existence. The other buildings on the site, unfortunately, have been removed. And so, again, what is being proposed under this application is to amend the original designation to include not only the Oasis Tower, but also the storefront building, the casita building, and the dining hall. In terms of the dining hall, as I had mentioned, this structure has been moved to the Village Green. You can see there from the lower image how it appears today. There is currently the candy shop that's there in the front of the building facing Palm Canyon, and then in the back is the Agua Caliente Cultural Museum. What is most notable about the structure is really the exposed roof structure on the inside. You can see in the image on the upper left from when the hotel was in operation and how it existed originally on the site, that the roof structure is the most visible and most decorative part of that structure. And then the image at the top right is looking in the candy shop today. While part of that structure has been covered up, the roof trusses are still there exposed. And so in the analysis that was prepared by Architectural Resources Group, they have determined that the structure is largely intact even though it has been moved and some of its elements have been covered up. Those are easily corrected. As I had mentioned, the storefront building that was part of the Oasis Hotel is also proposed to be added to the designation. You can see how they appeared during the hotel's operation on the upper left, and here in the lower right is a recent photo of the storefront building there. The request was reviewed by the Historic Site Preservation Board, and in making their findings, they determined that the additional structures meet criteria number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5, and in particular, being the only work of Lloyd Wright here in the city of Palm Springs, felt it was important to include the additional structures in the designation. There were concerns on the site, on the part of the Historic Preservation Board relative to integrity. The report does state relative to the dining hall that although the location and setting have changed, it still retains its original or sufficient integrity that it could be restored. Also, relative to the commercial storefronts in the Casita building, they retain a high degree of integrity. So based on that, the Historic Site Preservation Board has recommended approval of this amendment to the designation for the Oasis Hotel property. Staff would also recommend your approval of this amendment. The property owners attended the Historic Site Preservation Board meeting, and they stated that they did not fight the designation or object to the designation, but they would certainly request the assistance of the city in looking for ways to adaptively reuse the historic structures. As many of you are aware, they've mostly sat vacant for quite a period of time, and the property owners would like to see them reused in some fashion. That concludes my report to you, Mr. Mayor. If the property owners are here this evening, Mr. Lyle and Mr. Barron representing the ownership, if they could have 5 minutes to speak, I think that would be appropriate. And again, I'm not sure if they're here in the audience this evening. I don't believe that I see them.
Request of questions of staff, Mayor Pro Tem Roberts. Do you have a question of staff? Very well. Seeing no questions of staff, we will open the floor for public comment. The applicant has up to 5 minutes to present their case, and if requested, we'll have 2 minutes available at the end for rebuttal. Anyone speaking for the owner? Okay, seeing none. Do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this? Request a speak list. I don't see any. Do you have any speakers?
None, Mayor.
Okay, seeing none, we will close the public hearing. So, City Council? Comments? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief. This is a slam dunk. This is one of those happy feel-good moments we get up here from time to time. And I obviously enthusiastically support this Class 1 designation. And I have great hopes for the future of this site because there's some hidden treasures in there that have never really been honored the way they should. And essentially what makes Palm Springs unique from all the other great cities in the valley is our history, is our architectural history and our glamorous Hollywood history. And it's so great that we're still continuing to find these things. And I didn't know anywhere as much about this property until this report. And I want to compliment, Ken Lyon wrote this. It's just beautifully written, and please give him our thanks on this. It's I can't say that every staff report is thrilling and keeps me riveted at night, but this one really did get my attention. So thank you.
Okay, I certainly echo the Mayor Pro Tem's enthusiasm on this, and I'm really excited to hear that the owners would like to look for some recommendations for reuse, because this is the oldest modern building in the city and one of the oldest buildings, except for the Adobe. If you go in the jewelry store, the roof, the ceiling inside that jewelry store is beautiful. It looks like it's intact from original, and it's 96 years old or 94 years old. And if you go to Google Maps, the staff report was so good, I went to Google Maps and I looked at the aerial to look down on it. There's actually this casita, and I went and looked at it, and there's some slitted windows you can look into, and the inside is just empty. But there's a courtyard actually there that's almost the size of the casita, which opens from those shops in the front. And then there's the building that's just to the east side of the bell tower. So there's a lot of space inside this existing structure. So I think there should be some amazing opportunities for reuse of this building. I mean, look at Captor Plaza, and that was a mess, not nearly as old, but now it's actually vibrant again. So,
Mayor, maybe we need a tour of this building.
Yeah, I'd love to get that. Yeah, maybe we can get a tour.
Yeah, maybe we can work that out. Director Fagg, maybe we can get a tour of this building. I'd really love to see the inside of it. maybe get the press in there too and shine a little light on it.
We will certainly try and set that up for you.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Okay, nobody else is showing to request to speak. Is there any? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve? It's not on the screen. Let me see. Motion to approve made by Mayor Pro Tem Roberts, seconded by Councilmember Coors.
Motion passes unanimously, 5-0.
Item 2C, a public hearing to consider approval of a sewer construction refund agreement with Maggio Inc., a California corporation, for a public sewer line extension and Radio Road. Staff report, please.
We'll put that away. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. The item before you tonight is the sewer construction refund agreement between the City of Maggio Inc. The sewer line on Radio Road was extended as part of a condition of approval for the development of 2 parcels on Radio Road located at 246 and 245 and 247 Radio Road. The cost of the sewer improvements was approximately $99,656, and 2 additional parcels on Radio Road benefit from the sewer extension. The cost of the improvements was split amongst the 4 benefiting parcels at about $24,914 each. Upon approval of the agreement, the 2 additional benefiting parcels that did not participate in the construction of the sewer improvements will be charged the $24,914 fee upon application of a sewer connection permit. Upon collection of those fees, the city will reimburse the developer, so there will be no city costs. This was a public hearing, so the city mailed out notices to the affected property owners on March 18th of this year. Staff recommends the City Council open the public hearing, take public comment, and approve the sewer construction refund agreement. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Have any questions of staff? Councilmember Holstage?
I just have a quick question. And I know this is in a residential area, but the last few public hearings, we've said notice was mailed to all property owners, and I believe we had talked about in the past making sure all tenants and property owners would be notified. So I just wanted to make sure that we're following up and following that procedure when we're providing notice.
It's a legislative matter, and Councilmember Coors and I have spoken about it. It will be before you during the month of May.
Thank you. That's the only question I have.
Any other questions to staff before we open the public hearing? Councilmember Coors?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to confirm with the city attorney, although I already spoke to the assistant city manager, that because these are all private funds, there's no prevailing wage issue that the city has any liability for, risk on, or needs to make sure happened. I'm asking you, yeah. That's makes sense, right? There's no city funding. We didn't grant anyone money. We're just making sure people pay each other.
Yes.
So there's no prevailing wage issue here.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions to staff? Okay, seeing none, we will open the public hearing. The applicant has up to 5 minutes to present their case, and if requested, we'll have 2 minutes available at the end for rebuttal. Does the applicant wish to speak?
Good evening, Council. My name is Mario Berardi. I'm the owner of Maggio Inc. We did a couple buildings on the street, and there is no sewer. So about 10 years ago, we had to extend the sewer. We spent quite a bit of money, and we're just trying to recoup some. I already talked to the owners of the other properties. They agree with it. They don't even have a problem. Nobody showed up, as you can tell. So we're just looking for your blessing to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, do we have the public who wishes to speak?
We don't, Mr. Mayor. Remember, I'm the city clerk on this one.
Oh, that's right. Okay, moving up in the world. Okay. Okay, seeing none, we will close the public comments. Questions, comments, city council members' discussion. Councilmember Holstage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a technical question for staff. Since this is a public hearing, we're here and sitting in a quasi-judicial role to decide some of these issues, right? And so I just wanted to clarify, is what we're deciding on page 2, those 4 factors, the necessity of the installation, the reasonableness, is that what is in front of us to decide right now? And if so, if I could make a just general request about providing facts to support each of those items like we usually do in most public hearing items, I didn't see that here. And so I had some questions just in terms of my duty to decide the facts and the law. I would like that going forward, please, so that I can make the best decision possible. And I don't see it in here, so if I'm missing something, please let me know.
Now I'm the city attorney again, and yes, those are the factors. And I'm going to defer to Mr. Garcia since I don't have the foggiest idea how to provide you with the facts in support of those findings.
Well, if I might, Councilmember Holstage, these were the findings that the council made decades ago in establishing the policy. And so basically the extension of public sewers were determined at that point to be a public necessity and reasonable for extending the ability for reimbursement of those costs to benefiting properties. So really the action before you tonight is the approval of the reimbursement agreement.
He is correct. I made a mistake.
Thank you. So just that narrow issue, and that's why it wasn't detailed in the staff report like it always is. Thank you. Then I have no further questions.
Any other questions or discussion? Motion to approve made by Mayor Pro Tem Roberts, seconded by Councilmember Kors. Motion is on the floor. I did once. Mr.
City Clerk?
Attorney.
Appears to be 5-0, Mr. Mayor, in favor.
Thank you. You may now resume your city attorney duties. Cindy, we're glad to have you back. Thank you. Next public hearing, item 2D, which is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Palm Springs, California, modifying certain user fees and charges by implementing consumer price index increase and adopting the comprehensive fee schedule for fiscal year 2018-19. City Clerk, City Attorney, I believe you said you wanted to continue this?
Yes, that's right. What I'd like you to do is to open the public hearing and continue it to a date certain of May the 2nd. That's based on ongoing discussions that we've been engaged in with the Desert Valley Builders Association, and it's my recommendation that you take that action immediately.
So you're recommending we open public hearings but not take any testimony?
And not take testimony, just the way you're about to with 2E.
Okay. So we'll open the public hearing, and do we have a motion to continue? Motion to continue made by Councilmember Kors and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Roberts. Motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next item, item 2E, request by the City of Palm Springs for a zone text amendment to make minor modifications and corrections to section 93.20.200 through 93.20.13 of the Palm Springs zoning ordinance relative to the city's sign ordinance. The recommendation is to continue to hearing on May 2nd, 2018 with no public testimony at this time. Do we need to open the testimony on this?
That's your staff recommendation, yes.
Okay. Open the public hearing on this. Do we have a motion to approve the continuation made by Councilmember Kors, seconded by Councilmember Middleton? Motion is on the floor. Councilmember Kors? I know.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, now is unfinished business. First item, item 4, updated impact analysis relating to Measure C, a citizens' initiative to prohibit the vacation rental of single-family residents in the city's R1 zone. Staff report, please.
Excuse me,
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, okay.
And I'll just note, as Councilmember Holstage removes herself from the dais, that she's recusing based upon an income interest, that is personal income.
Mr. Mayor and Council, the information being provided updates the supplement and supplements the Tourism Economics Report provided to you on February 21st. The Tourism Economics Report identified a number of industries, types of businesses, and employees that would be negatively impacted by the loss of visitor spending that would have stayed at the single-family resident vacation rental units, and the negative impact would occur should Measure C pass, as was presented to you in the past. You can see the different sectors on page 21 of the report, which is also page 12 of the Tourism Economics Report, where it shows lodging, food, retail, recreation, local transportation, all sectors being affected by the potential loss of visitor spending. As you're aware, visitor spending also generates city revenues, such as sales tax, including Measure J and Measure D, and transient occupancy tax. The Tourism Economics Report had a final estimate of the potential loss to city revenues as $6.3 million. I'm sorry, of the TOT was $6.3 million. However, this was still an estimate, as they did not know the actual difference in vacation rental rates for condos and single-family residences. Since that time, staff has been able to determine actual TOT payments for the owner-operated vacation rental condo units. This is not an estimate, it is the actual amount of TOT paid to the city for transit occupancy taxes, specifically for owner-operated condo units. With this information, staff was able to calculate the amount of TOT generated by all condo units and the TOT generated by all non-condo units, the vast majority of which are single-family residences. The results of this analysis are on page 5 of the staff report. Condos are estimated to generate 4.5% of the vacation rental TOT revenue, with the remaining 95.5% in vacation rental TOT revenue being attributable to non-condo units. The amount of TOT revenue generated by those non-condo units is estimated to be $7,235,322 of the $7.58 million generated by all vacation rental units. With this supplemental information, the potential loss of revenue to the city would be $10.5 million as opposed to the $9.6 million amount originally estimated by Tourism Economics. Staff is requesting the council receive and file this supplemental information.
Okay, Councilmember Coors. Push your button.
Turn it off.
There you go.
Oh, now it's on again. First, thank you for doing that work and getting us more accurate data. I appreciate that. A couple questions. One, first for the city attorney. Based on the information that you shared earlier, if the definitions as written in Measure C were enacted and the definitions were ultimately the ones that followed, due to the definition of vacation rental as only a multi-unit building, it means single-family residences not in R1 would also not be allowed. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know if I'd phrase it exactly that way. It creates a contradiction.
Well, if a court were to find the definitions to be...
Right. If you define vacation rental as not including anything but multifamily, it becomes very difficult for the city to regulate single-family residences that are purporting to operate under the allowance for 24 months of vacation rental operation.
So that TOT would arguably go away as well.
It becomes very difficult to regulate in any fashion, whether taxes or enforcement of the rules regarding vacation rental, noise, garbage.
This is always a bit of a moving target, so I just want to make sure I'm clear. And then on condos, because if vacation rental is only a multi-unit building, and a multi-unit building can only have one vacation rental if they share any common facilities, it would mean if a court were to follow the definition as written in Measure C, that would mean only one condominium in the each entire complex, if the HOA allows it, could be rented as a vacation rental because they share pools and other things.
Yeah, it's a compelling point.
So that could wipe out all of that. Almost all the TOT.
Well, we'd certainly be looking to guidance from a court. I see your
so
point.
we don't, So this is sort of the minimum we think that we would lose.
This is the minimum loss. That's a good way to put it. The minimum loss to the city.
Okay. And maybe that's a good way for us to share with the public. This is the minimum loss given the inconsistencies in Measure C as drafted. Is that an accurate way to?
Well,
I'm trying to figure out how to.
I don't want to take sides here
No,
because
it's
that's
not
not
a
my
side,
role.
it's just-
But the fact is that it's going to depend on what a court will say. If the voters approve this measure, we're going to, if you take my legal advice, be going to the court, the Superior Court, and asking a judge to tell us what this thing means.
Okay. So my other question is, since there was a request in public comment that we amend the report so that when people go on the website or see information from mailers from various campaigns, that the report reflects this new information. Can you explain why doing just a supplemental staff report is sufficient instead of just amending the report with the new data we have?
I'm not altogether sure I understand the question.
Okay, well, we're not amending the actual report. We're giving.
Okay.
So
the document
the document will have information that's not accurate.
This is a supplement to that document. That document was prepared at the city's request by a consultant at some expense to the city. We don't have unlimited resources to dedicate to this matter, and we felt responsible, since we knew there were discrepancies in the data, to have staff analyze and report back to the council. This report clarifies and refines for the council and for the public what we had previously presented. And again, given the new contradictions we're pointing out, internal contradictions, it's the minimum financial impact of Measure C.
Okay. That's it for questions at the moment. Thank you.
Councilmember Middleton. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, Mayor Pro Tem Roberts, I'm sorry.
I'll be brief. Mr. Kotkin, Dr. Reddy, I need your help. So I've struggled with this report from day one. I'm glad, Jay, that it's a little more refined. I still have some problems with it because it seems to me we should be able to extrapolate from history on homes being used as second homes or rentals, some percentage of how those homes, in other words, if this ban passed and those homes went back into either a long-term rental market or a part-time vacation home market versus vacation rental, we should be able to extrapolate some numbers there. And I'm a little frustrated with that. But I'll tell you, that becomes very unimportant to me when I learn of the things that Councilman Kors just brought up again. And that, Mr. Kotkin, when you use the term, I think it was gigantic mess, or the potential of a gigantic mess, this actually scares me. And I guess where I need your help is, if that's the case, if we have inconsistencies like how many condos can be used in a complex because their language says there can be no shared facilities, that makes even our analysis that we've gotten, our independent report, fly out the window. And you know, here we are trying to put together an informational piece that we want to send out to the general public. And how do we even do that accurately? How do we make the public aware of the facts of this when we can't make heads or tails of it. And this isn't a comment, this really is a question. We've never dealt with anything like this before. We've got a very, very important measure going before our public. This will have significant consequences on us financially. I don't know where to go with this. This is the first time I'm deeply humbled by this, and not in a good way, because I'm afraid that our public isn't going to be armed with the information that they need to make a decision about this.
Sorry?
Go ahead, please.
It's a challenging situation when the initiative itself is pointing in contrary directions on important points that have to do with the city's finances. I've tried to express that in as neutral terms as I possibly can, and the regulation and the care that the council put in adopting the 2017 ordinance, and there were, you'd know better than I how many meetings and how many residents turned out.
22 to be exact.
So
meetings that was.
That ordinance was crafted, and even that ordinance wasn't perfect. The council intends to bring back revisions to that ordinance after this election, if it's able to do so without a problem from the voters passing Measure C. And as a practical matter, I get where you're coming from. It's a contradiction. There's no good answer. There's no easy answer.
And what I would say to add to that is we tried to make the best inferences we can with the information that we have. You're right. Unlike anything we've seen, there's more moving targets with this issue. And so we're trying to respond to that. But I think maybe the best way to characterize it in this case, given the circumstances, is what we know is that there are certain numbers that we're going to lose, like the TOT. And let's just take, we have an estimate of roughly the TOT and the sales about 10.5 million. Let's just say, you know, it's a range now. Even say it's 9 million. Let's just say it's 8 million. Governing
or 11
these
million.
Other things. So, or it could be the other way.
Yeah.
So even a very conservative estimate, it's going to affect the city significantly. What we don't know is it could even affect us more significantly than we do know or could estimate, given the range of what this might be. Particularly with the uncertainties is what the attorney is outlined.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy. My concern is that given, again, the inconsistencies that we're now seeing, you know, where this measure, the one thing it's clear about is banning vacation rentals in R1. With the inconsistencies that we've talked about earlier tonight, it's a virtual ban. We're going to have, what, you know, 5 condominiums left as vacation rentals, or maybe the tribe doesn't subscribe to this and allows unrestricted vacation rentals. I just feel as if we need to somehow, and I guess that was my real question, what can we do now to educate the community even on these questions? You know, we're going to send out a fact sheet. Do we need to send a follow-up on our own concerns about the inconsistency in the ordinance itself? What can we do to get this information out?
I'd like to give you some legal advice, but this isn't the place that I'll do that. In terms of potential things to do, Dr. Reddy's answer was very laser focused on where we're coming from when we make our public statements. We have to be neutral. We have to give you those minimums so that you understand there's a massive loss to begin with economically to the city if Measure C passes. Mr. Verada's report, Dr. Reddy's comments, they've outlined that. If you look at my impartial analysis, I've addressed that with even lower numbers. But at the end of the day, the numbers could be massive, and it will depend on what a court says, and it is, I said a gargantuan mess, and I meant it. It's very difficult when the measure is pointing in both directions. Best I can do tonight, I'm sorry.
Well, all right, thank you. Eddie, I just, maybe I would look to my colleagues, maybe we need to do another informational piece or some other ideas, because I think this new information that's come to light is just as important as what we gleaned in our independent financial analysis. Because legally, this could be a much bigger mess than even the financial dropout on it. And so I really am looking for ideas here tonight.
Well, Councilmember Middleton wanted to speak. Councilmember Middleton?
Mr. Mayor, thank you, but at this point, I think my questions have been exhausted. I have a couple of comments that would be brief, but until I'll leave those for when we're finished with the questions. I think we are, Mayor. Okay, so, you know, one of the things that this truly brings to mind is when you look at the letter that was brought by vacation rental owners of Palm Springs. Writing law is hard, and getting it right takes work. And one of the things that happens at this dais and in the back and forth in subcommittees and hearing from people on absolutely every side of an issue is you get a chance to clean up your mistakes before they get to the point that people are being asked to vote on them. The initiative process doesn't do that. What we had is a group that I will give them every benefit of the doubt was extremely well-intentioned on a subject that's of grave concern to any number of our residents. But they didn't have the benefit of people who disagreed with them. And without that benefit of people who would challenge and disagree with them, they came up with an law that is extreme in its nature, contradictory, and will leave the city and the residents of the city with numerous unanswered questions if in fact it is approved. And it brings to mind why it is so important that we deal with complex areas of law such as this by leaving it to the City Council, working with staff, and involving the public to make these kinds of decisions. One of the things I'm going to say very clearly, if this measure is defeated, I will be reaching out, and I think everyone on this council will be reaching out to work with those who have advocated for more restrictions on vacation rentals to make sure that we get those restrictions right where we need them and we preserve neighborhoods. And with that, I'm committed to making our vacation rental ordinances work, and I hope the voters give us the chance to continue to make it work.
Could be reasonably construed as advocating a particular way to vote. We want to be factual. That's what these reports are. And I know your comments were offered in that spirit and in that context, excuse me. These are concerns, and the voters will do what they may, and hopefully people turn out and vote.
Okay, any other questions, any comments? Okay, we will receive and file. Next item, new business, item 5A, Leaf Industries LLC requesting an administrative minor modification seeking relief from a minimum separation distance requirements from a 1,120 square foot cannabis dispensary located in Suite D at 3700 East Vistacino Road.
Could we just wait for Councilmember Holstage? I think she's on the way back.
I'm sorry. Staff report, please.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, this is a request for a waiver of distance for a dispensary from a public park. Going back to your zoning ordinance, it requires that there be a minimum 600-foot separation distance between any cannabis use and a protected use. And protected uses are defined as being parks, schools, playgrounds, youth centers, etc. In looking at this particular application, the proposed dispensary is located in a retail center on the northeast corner of Gene Autry and Vistacino, and it's identified there with the dispensary title. There is a public park that's located approximately 170 feet away on the southwest corner of the intersection of those two roads. In terms of the measurement of distance, our code specifies that the separation distance is measured from property line to property line. So as you can see in the exhibit here, measuring from property line to property line, the distance between the dispensary property and the public park is 170 feet. And so consequently, it does not meet our 600-foot separation distance as required. In looking at the facts of this application, the park itself is about 1.7 acres in size, and it tends to be more of a passive park. It does have a trail through it. As you can see here, it also has a couple of bocce courts, but there are no playground facilities, and the park is not oriented towards the use by children in any way, shape, or form. And so in terms of this application, what staff looked at is this going to impact the general health, safety, and welfare in terms of the location of the dispensary from the park? Looking at this area, this is not a pedestrian area, so we don't see people going from the dispensary to hang out or loiter in the park. Again, you're crossing 2 6-lane streets to get to the park. And then looking at the park itself, this is not one of our parks where it is oriented towards youth. There's no play fields or play equipment or anything like that. Again, it's a linear park. It's more of a passive park. And so based on those factors, we do not think that this separation of distance waiver would impact general health, safety, and welfare. And so staff is recommending approval of this waiver of distance. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. We also have the applicant for the dispensary here in the audience to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Director Fagg. Councilmember Coors.
Thank you, Mayor. If my recollection from when we drafted this was state law doesn't have a distance requirement from parks. That was something we added, mostly focused on trying to do something consistent with schools because children use parks.
That's exactly correct.
Okay. So this is totally within state law, and
yes.
And from the report, seems not to raise the concerns about children, as that is not a park children use, and it is across a road we wouldn't want anyone to try and cross, let alone children. Do have one question. Was the neighborhood association that is next to the park notified of this?
I don't believe that we did individual notices. As part of our notification, we do electronic notification to our neighborhood organizations.
Okay. So the organization is what I was asking?
Yes.
Okay, and we haven't received any comments from them?
No, we have not.
Okay, that answers my questions, and I appreciate the findings why this is appropriate in this location. So thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know, this park looks like a great place to get stoned, actually, and bocce ball. I just wanted to see Dr. Reddy's face when I said that. Director Fagg, I just want to say thank you for this. You know, we're starting to now see the first challenges to the ordinance and the distances, and this looks like a perfect example of why it was good to have flexibility here, because this looks like it makes perfect sense and doesn't have any negative impacts. And as long as the HOA doesn't have a problem with it, it looks like a good call. Thank you.
Councilmember Holstage. I don't see Councilmember Middleton's name. Did you? Oh.
Thank you,
on yours?
Mr. Mayor. I had the same question about state law, so that's great to hear. Thank you. And let's see what other question I had. Are there similar rules regarding distance for liquor stores, since we frequently talk about cannabis dispensaries or the new liquor stores in our city?
No, we don't have separation distance requirements for liquor stores. Through the state regulation, we do look at oversaturation, but there are no separation distance requirements.
Thank you.
And the state laws do require the 600 feet from schools. That's part of the difference. We were very proactive and more or less moved in the direction of all child intense uses and locations.
Thank you. And I have to say, I did not know there was a park there, and my husband, who grew up in this town, did not know there was a park there, and now I know where to play bocce ball, so I'm very excited. And nothing else.
I'd just like to question on this park. Is there any parking places at this park? I know, but the park itself doesn't have any parking places.
No, I don't believe that it does.
It's more of in the neighborhood. That park was put together with a grant, actually, that we received, and for a bocce ball court. in the neighborhood, and it improved a situation that was there, but the parking was always intended to be just on the end corners, end of those streets in the neighborhood.
So calling this a park is sort of a stretch. No bathrooms. Okay, no bathrooms. Oh, okay, we have another second park with no bathrooms, okay. Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, motion, do we have a motion to approve? Motion's been made by Councilmember Kors, seconded by Councilmember Middleton. Motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next item, item 5B, designation of a delegate representative and alternative representative for the 2018 Southern California Association of Governments General Assembly. Staff report, please.
For the upcoming meeting, obviously a designation of a voting delegate and the alternate.
Yeah, I would have sworn money that we did this when we did the subcommittees, and I think maybe it just missed. I thought it was myself and Councilmember Middleton.
This is the annual meeting that they require.
Yeah. I've already signed up to go. Okay, so we've already signed up to go. Okay. And if Councilmember Middleton would like to be the voting member, that is fine, because I've been to 2 of these, and it's got like 3 motions that have all been approved by staff, and it's just unanimous approval, so it's not like, yeah, I know, too. Okay. All right, so we'll approve it, and Councilmember Middleton can be the voting delegate. So do we have a motion to approve, made by Councilmember Roberts, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Roberts, seconded by Councilmember Holstage. The motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
Item 5C, continued discussion and direction on the fiscal year 2018-19 budget. Any staff report or comments?
Yes, Mayor, members of council, there's no formal part of the budget process for this evening. As we indicated that we're going to have the budget on the agenda for each meeting. It gives council an opportunity to give us any further direction if you care to do so. That being said, I did want to just report out, and in your yellow folders is a one sheet it's titled Budget List of Extras. A couple things that have occurred that I am going to be discussing with the budget subcommittee, and ideas that we would ultimately want to bring forward that we're recommending, and I'll just run through them quickly. In the IT department, closed captioned equipment for the hearing impaired TV access, that's $50,000, although actually that will come off this list because we can use what we call our public access TV fees for that, but I just want to let you know we will be including in the budget, but it will be in a different fund. The economic development incentive programs, the subcommittee on business retention had asked us to bring that forward, and they'll be giving you more discussions on that when we have budget discussions. Council legislative interns, we're looking at just about $40,000, which would give us an opportunity to bring interns in to do legislative work for the city council. And then there's 3 things on the planning department. As we discussed, the time to do a new general plan update, which could be a cost of $1.2 million to $1.3 million. It's very possible that in lieu of that very high dollar number is doing a zoning plan update at roughly $400,000. In essence, will get us several more years down the road before we have to do a general plan update. The planning director is recommending that as an alternate. It's significantly less expense. It's not in the current budget proposal, so it's listed here. An associate planner could deal specifically with historic site designation, is what the planning director thinks would be helpful for the department, given where we are on the historic designations. And then the contract employee finally, to help us with the zoning code update, instead of having an actual formal employee with all the benefits and things of that nature, what he's recommending is that a contract employee for probably 2 years is what we would need, and this would be the first year of that. That being said, it has a total of about $900,000 if you take the $50,000 off for the closed caption. So that'll be a discussion that'll go back to the budget subcommittee and come back obviously to the full council. I just wanted you to be aware of those additions. And finally, I would just note that at the bottom of the page, there's two to be determined items. One, now that we're moving well into the cannabis process, the city attorney is finalizing his fee study, if you will, and we'll be bringing that forward. And in terms of what we have to do in terms of enforcement and investigating and the applications, we will hopefully have fees that will offset the cost of what that's going to be. In addition, the fire department inspections, we know there are additional inspections we need to do. Some of those will be associated with cannabis. So again, once we figure out more of the cannabis details in terms of the fees, we'll be able to better tell you what that expense and revenue will be. That being said, Council, this is just for your general consideration now. You're welcome to give us any direction. Otherwise, we'll be back in with subcommittee discussions, and next council meeting is the joint meeting with the Measure J Commission that will be focusing on capital improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy. Councilmember Middleton.
Dr. Reddy, could you tell us a little bit more about what the $250,000 of economic incentive programs is?
I'm happy to, or I would yield to the subcommittee if they would prefer.
Sure. So we had talked about a budget for economic incentives and bringing back some of those programs to make investments in our economy and local businesses to grow revenue over time. Takes money to make money. And so we're talking about some of those incentives that Councilmember Coors brought up earlier today that are still under consideration by our subcommittee. But those are things like facade improvement programs, programs for smaller hotels to do renovations that were excluded from the TOT program before. Those are the job creation programs that we're discussing. The food desert incentive for other areas that are underserved. And so those are just some of the incentives that we had been talking about. And in choosing them, in our strategy and goals was to get the most bang for our buck as well in terms of how to incentivize other different types of businesses to grow and operate in Palm Springs so that we can diversify our economy, grow better paying jobs for our people, things like that.
Thank you. Moving on, I want to congratulate the city manager and the planning director for the recommendations regarding the zoning plan update, the associate planner, and contract employee for zoning code update. All of us who sat through the numerous meetings that went on regarding plan development districts, the underlying issue consistently was we needed to get our zoning up to date, and it's going to take money to make that happen, but if we are going to make the reforms that we are trying to put forward on planning, reducing the number of planning development districts, we need to make this investment in updating our codes.
Thank you. Councilmember Coors.
Thank you, Mayor. When we come back, and I appreciate that, and all great things to spend more money on, and there are many of those. So when we meet in May, preferably at the first meeting, we'll be going over with Measure J as well, just for the rest of council, I think getting, with these increases, what is our total reserve, including our pension reserve, because that is a total that we have available in a downturn if we had to go to it. And what is our total without the pension reserve? So if there's a sense it's too high, it's too low, getting at least what the majority council thinks is that right delta, the right fit, is going to be critical in us determining if we add these things, do we have to make other cuts? So we have enough time from that early meeting in May to come back in June with the budget. So that's just for the rest of council, I think would really help Councilmember Middleton and I. But I think knowing those numbers, because really our reserve will be the total, including the pension reserve. But that's money we're hoping we don't have to touch, given what we know we're going to owe in pensions in the years ahead. So what it is with and without. And then I think we can have a thoughtful conversation about what that target number is, and then come back with a couple scenarios to the council for the budget based on that and what things are the most optional, so we can make those decisions. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, I had one question, one suggestion I wanted to give to the budget subcommittee is I go to a lot of BIA luncheons and other luncheons where people speak on what they're doing as far as automation of their permitting process. And I know the city seems to be the furthest ahead is La Quinta. They've been working on this for 4 years, doing a very gradual implementation of software that allows residents to actually apply for, pay for, and check the status of their basic permits online. And a lot of ours, most of ours is pretty basically mid-century technology, mid-20th century technology. And, you know, I'm not talking about looking at a process to replace any staff, but as the city grows, to help us keep from having to add a huge amount of additional staff, we should really start looking at a multi-year program on implementing in stages some automation to that permitting process. Palm Desert has been doing this for a couple of years, have made some great progress. Rancho Mirage is doing a study on it right now. So I think this is something perhaps, you know, we could look at maybe doing getting a consultant to do a study on this and give us some recommendations on what the technology out there is, what other cities are doing, and give us a recommendation for maybe a phased 4 or 5 year project, because it's going to take a while and it's going to be expensive, but we'll never get it done if we don't start planning for it and looking at it. And we're just going to keep adding staff, which adds to our pension requirements and all of our personnel costs. So I'd like for us to look at that if we could, please. Mayor Pro Tem Roberts?
Mayor, I would note that might be helpful next Thursday. Actually, we do have a vendor that's doing a demonstration for us. We've been working at this on a little more incremental basis, and there's a package, and certainly and you're welcome to join us. We'll let you know when that is.
Okay, but to get to the point that Palm Desert you can do almost everything. I mean La Quinta, almost everything online now. That's going to take us a few years to get to. It's going to cost money.
Indeed, yes.
It's going to cost a lot of money. Councilmember Holstage? Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, quickly, you know, in our last strategic planning session, this was a big issue a few years ago. And I know that from my own experience on the Planning Commission, and I echo Councilwoman Middleton's comments earlier, we're way behind on this. And I know Director Fags really needed the help. And I agree that doing a zoning update now is more important than really starting the general plan, and this could go a long way to helping us expedite the general plan by getting our zoning cleaned up. So I very much support these recommendations from planning, because we've been kicking this can down the road for a long time. I wanted to say something else, but I'll leave it there. But I very much support that we get moving on this and give them the help that they need now. Oh, I know what I was going to ask, because Aaron was in the room as well. Didn't we already fund, or am I thinking of something else, a major software update for planning? Are we already working on that? But have you already been researching that, Aaron, working with?
We're certainly working on it. That's what we're demoing next Thursday, and I actually just got the formal invite. We've been waiting on that. What we're looking at is making sure that we keep with a vision, that we're going where we want to go as a city, and we're not just piecemealing things. So looking at software that would do one of two things, either be step one to get where we need to go, or be an interim solution that we can take that data and move somewhere else and not be locked in with somebody. So that's why we've been stepping carefully. It's taken a little bit, but it's to make sure that that data is the way we need it when we move.
Thank you.
And I would just note that it's hugely important, the planning side, but we're also are keeping our eye on, you know, the whole financial side of the organization. That software is, I mean, I don't even know, I mean, 20 years old practically. So we're trying to do a very comprehensive approach to this, but there's other systems we need to focus on as well.
Oh, I know that we talked about needing major software updates for a number of departments, and I guess that was the one that was coming up in strategic, but planning certainly has needed it for years as well.
Councilmember Holstage.
Thank you. Now I just got to echo my colleagues' comments. I had written down before I got in the yellow folder these extras, so general plan and zoning. So you already did it for us again. So thank you. That's incredibly important, and we do want to move forward on that. I also think hearing impaired TV access is a must-do for our council, and so I would also support that as well. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on this? Okay, the next item is public comment for non-agenda items. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the City Council on items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. Although the city values your comments pursuant to the Brown Act, generally cannot take any actions on items not listed on the proposed agenda. 2 minutes will be assigned to each speaker. City Clerk, do we have anyone wishing to speak?
Yes, we do. 2 representatives from Family YMCA of the Desert.
Okay, I see Janie Bark and Dave, the rest of it's truncated.
Good evening, we're happy to be here. I'm Janie Bark. I'm the director for ACES for Family YMCA of the Desert, and this is Dave Abalon. He's the coordinator with the Family YMCA of the Desert.
So I just kind of want to talk to you guys and let you guys be aware of the Family YMCA and the services and opportunities that we provide for the whole valley. The first being we have a youth and government program that where we take high school students and teach them about California legislation, and we take them to Sacramento, we take over the Capitol, and it's an opportunity to give them a more hands-on opportunity to learn about democracy, and it is for high school students, and we would love to see more students from Palm Springs High School and any other high schools here in Palm Springs. We would like to see more representatives on this side of the valley. Also, we have Camp Oaks, which is starting in June, or starts in June 16th, or on 16th, and we take over 250 students up to Big Bear. We stay in a 3-walled cabin, and we do everything campy, so camp songs, camp skits, zip lining, kayaking, hiking, all the good stuff. So that is always available for you know, the youth here in Palm Springs, and we would like to see more students and kids from Palm Springs. Lastly, I kind of want to focus on our ACES program because we actually have 5 sites here in Palm Springs where we serve about roughly 500 of our students. And this is an after-school program where the Y works with the school district, and we provide a safe opportunity or a safe place for the students to stay at while their parents might be working. And we provide everything from homework assistance. We have private tutors that come in and work with the kids that may be struggling with test scores. And we provide a lot of other engaging enrichment activities. And again, it is a free program for all parents who may need this. So we always ask for the parents, if they need anything, to contact the school. And most likely we have a service that can help them out. So I just want to thank you guys and appreciate your time. And I want to actually say thank you to Councilmember Holstage. She has come and visited our site at Cahuilla Elementary, and she's been a great supporter of that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other speakers?
None, Mayor.
Seeing none, we will close the final public comments portion of the meeting. Next is City Council and City Manager requests and upcoming agenda development. Councilmember Coors.
Thank you, Mayor. In looking at the list of upcoming items, I just want to maybe note a few things. One, the city attorney, we were planning to have the rest of the public integrity ordinance in May. So just to add that in here. And if we can, city manager, if we've been trying to get that quarterly meeting of the public integrity standing committee set with Councilmember Middleton, myself, and the city attorney with enough time to review that at a public meeting. So any help in getting that set up would be appreciated. One issue which Councilmember Holstage brought up on notice to tenants as well as property owners, I thought that was a policy we voted on at the last council, so I was a little surprised to see that that's not in place, even if there's no ordinance yet. So we had voted to move forward with that at the last council, so I thought we were doing it. So, but either way, let's get that done. And the last thing is and I know you're working on this, but, and I think Mayor Pro Tem and I are the subcommittee to address the issue of properties that would fit under historic designation for demolition being remodeled to the point of basic demolition, and getting a draft ordinance on that, and to make sure we're getting that done shortly. And I know you're working on that. I just want to, it's not on the list, so I just wanted to highlight that. And when you're ready to meet with us, just let us know. And I appreciate it. I know you're working on it.
Thank you. We did speak about it, and I am.
Yeah, it's just not on the list, so I just wanted to highlight that. So it was a complete list. Thank you.
Councilmember Middleton.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I've raised this question and issue with the city manager and also briefly with city attorney. The Planning Commission is perhaps one of our most important commissions, and experience on that commission matters because of the untimely death of Commissioner Randy Lowe and my own election. Earlier this year, we replaced 2 members of the Planning Commission. We have 2 members of the commission, Lynn Callardine and Kathy Wormack, who on June 30 will be termed out and not eligible for reappointment. And I would like to see the council working with staff look at the potential of extending their term for another year so that we do not have an entire majority of our planning commission replaced in less than 6 months. And I believe city manager is going to bring something to us within the next few meetings to give us the opportunity to accomplish that if we choose to do so.
Thank you. Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Roberts.
I just wanted to echo the concerns of Councilwoman Middleton. If nothing else, I would very much support extending Kathy Wormack's term for some period, given that she is the chair and she has the most experience right now. So I think that's a good idea, and I think they've been a little concerned about being a little bit too new of a planning commission all at once.
Councilmember Holstage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a broad request. I believe the last council had engaged in strategic planning and set strategic goals, and this new council has not done that, and it feels, for me at least, a bit unruddered without that. And so I know that we're working on a lot right now in our city, but I would like to move forward and try to make that happen for us so that we can at least set aside some time to have some strategic goals, or look at the past councils and see where we want to continue that forward and amend it. I also have an unpopular request, but I feel a duty to bring it up because I keep getting emails and letters from constituents about the buzz. And I'm not here to relitigate the buzz with my fellow council because I think I'm outvoted. However, I would like to look at other transportation programs that we could do to alleviate the need that people are bringing up. So, you know, the buzz was used by residents and tourists. I think we've discussed a bit that other cities have provided transportation vouchers or other types of incentives or programs with Uber and Lyft or with taxis to allow for people with mobility issues who can't get from the uptown to the downtown, those of us who are lazy and don't want to walk that far, people who are drinking and don't want to drive. I think that is really useful. And you know, we really didn't have a broad public discussion about this matter because when it came forward, we decided sort of unexpectedly to end that program. And so we didn't get a lot of public feedback about what their needs are. And so perhaps, and I'd be happy to work with staff and come up with some solutions there. But I think we need to hear from the public about what their needs are in terms of transportation downtown, and if there's a gap that we can fill there that the buzz is going to leave empty. Thank you.
Councilmember Middleton.
In response to that, I don't want to get too far, but I am the city's representative to Sunline, And I can say that I have had some very productive preliminary conversations with the executive director of Sunline, and I am hopeful that within the next few weeks we will have something that we can discuss with the rest of council.
Any other requests or agenda items? Yeah. Okay. Seeing none, going on. We will adjourn to a special meeting tomorrow night, Thursday, April 19, 2018, at 6 o'clock p.m., preceded by a closed session in the small conference room at, I believe, 4:30. So with that, we are adjourned. 2